Okay, we should be good.
All right, great. Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome to the Tuesday, January 12th meeting of the Carrboro Town Council. We will start out our meeting as we usually do every meeting, I hope, with a poem by our poet laureate, Fred Joyner, who has just been brought over here into the room. Awesome. Hey there, Fred.
Hello.
Hey, good evening.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Here, good to see you.
How y'all doing? It's good to see you all.
Good, good.
I'm gonna read a little poem. It's actually, I'm gonna read some prose. Actually, a short prose piece. It's called "The Book of Delights." This is a book by this poet named Ross Gay. You should check this out. It's really cool. It's after the election in 2016. I think that was the time window. He started writing these tried to write these like one a day kind of things, and just observations of things to be happy about, to find delight in the everyday. And so they're really cool, and there's really kind of like ordinary things that Ross Gay is really a poet's poet. He has a beautiful lens. So this poem is called, or this little prose piece is called "Sharing a Bag." I adore it when I see two people. Today it was, from the looks of it, a mother and a child here on Canal Street in Chinatown, sharing the burden of a shopping bag or a sack of laundry, by each gripping one of the handles. It at first seems to encourage a kind of staggering, as the uninitiated or the impatient will try to walk at one's own pace, the bag twisting this way and that, whacking shins or skidding along the ground. But as we mostly do, feeling the sack, which has become a kind of tether between us, we modulate our pace, even our sway and saunter. The good and soul rhythms we might swear we live by, to the ones on the other side of the sack. I support part of why I adore the sack sharing is because most often this is a burden one or the other could manage just fine solo, which makes it different from dragging Granny's armoire up to, say, or wrestling free a truck stuck hip deep in a snowbank. Yes, it is the lack of necessity of this act that perhaps precisely why it delights me so. Everything that needs doing, getting the groceries or the laundry home would get done just fine without this meager collaboration. But the only thing that needs doing without it would not. He's a master of language and just looking at one little moment. And the reason why I read that, I think it's self-explanatory, but like these times we need each other, right? And these times we really need each other, and it's going to be awkward for us. And I'm talking about even just amongst our own allies, right? Like, and our comrades and fellows. So yeah, I encourage you all to pick up this book. It's a good little meditation thing you could read just in the morning or to end your day. So thank you very much. Happy New Year, and thank you for your work.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Fred. Awesome way to start out the new year, our meeting. So appreciate it. Appreciate you. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, y'all. We have on our agenda one resolution. It's entitled National Mentoring Month. And this is a resolution that we had last January that Barbara had proposed to us. I sent it around to everyone a week or two ago. And so tonight we're going to read that resolution. And Kathy is bringing over Sonia Frischmeyer. I think that's with Mentor NC. Sonia, are you there?
I am.
Hey,
yes.
Great. Good to see you. So I'm going to turn it over to Barbara to go ahead and read through the resolution. And then afterward, you're welcome to make some remarks to us if you would like. So thank you for being here. Okay, Barbara, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Lydia. This is the National Mentoring Month resolution. Whereas January 2021 will mark the 19th anniversary of National Mentoring Month, an annual campaign to focus attention on the need for mentors, as well as how each of us can work together to increase the number of mentors to help ensure positive outcomes for our young people. And whereas the town of Carrboro honors volunteer mentors who support young people by showing up for them and demonstrating their commitment to helping them thrive. And whereas mentoring programs such as Mentor North Carolina and Blue Ribbon Mentor Advocate make our communities and our state stronger by driving meaningful relationships that increase social capital for young people and provide invaluable support networks. And whereas during the COVID-19 pandemic, mentoring programs have stepped up to fill gaps for young people and families, connecting them with resources and ensuring that mentoring relationships continue virtually to ensure social connection despite physical distancing. And whereas mentoring plays a pivotal role in career exploration and supports workplace skills by helping young people set career goals, equipping mentors with the skills needed to support the professional growth of young people, and driving positive outcomes for young people and businesses. And whereas quality mentoring promotes healthy relationships and communication, self-esteem, emotional growth, and well-being for young people. And whereas students who meet regularly with their mentors are more than 52% less likely than their peers to skip a day of school, and youth who face an opportunity gap and have a mentor are 55% more likely to be enrolled in college than those who without a mentor. And whereas youth who meet regularly with their mentors are 46% less likely than their peers to start using drugs and 27% less likely to start drinking. And whereas almost half of adults today report having a mentor in their youth, and those rates appear to have been rising steadily over the past several decades. And whereas National Mentoring Month is the time of year to celebrate and promote mentors, mentees, and the mentoring movement. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Carrboro Town Council does hereby proclaim January 2021 as National Mentoring Month in the town of Carrboro and encourages members of the community to elevate and encourage mentoring, elevate and encourage mentoring throughout our town, county, state, and nation for the sake of our younger generations and the future. My pleasure to read it. Thank you.
Barbara, thank you. Thank you for that. Right, Sonia, feel free to add in with any words that you would like.
First of all, thank you so much for doing this again. Thank you to Barbara, to Mayor Pro Tem Foushee for bringing this proclamation before us. As Fred said, we need each other. And I think that what's been happening since March of last year for our students who were abruptly taken from the four walls of school that they knew to a time of so much uncertainty, mentoring programs have stepped up and done everything they can to support their school systems, to make sure that young people stay engaged in their education and in their communities. And it's been a really heavy lift. I think, we know how much, having access to the internet was a barrier, et cetera. So really, really grateful for this. I think more than ever, We need to recognize and appreciate the mentors that have, brought us all. I mean, we can all probably think back to somebody who made a big difference in the way we, approached our careers and our journeys as people. And I'm sure that many of you are mentors and guides and coaches to people in your lives. And this is really the time for us as a community to come together and support each other in whatever way we want, so that our young people don't lose out, not only on a year of learning, but a year of connection and relationship. So truly, truly grateful to all of you for making this possible. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for being with us. And we were happy to issue that resolution. So. All right.
Mayor, sorry to interrupt. Since it's a resolution, I will need the motion second for that, please.
Okay. Motion by Barbara, second by Randy. All in favor say aye. Randy?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
Me, aye. Damon?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
Jackie?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
It's unanimous. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Kathy, for reminding us of that.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks, Sonia.
All righty. Moving on next then to announcement of upcoming meetings.
Right, Mayor and Town Council. Between now and your meeting next week, the Arts Committee will meet on January 13th, along with the Economic Sustainability Commission. That's a meeting and a workshop for the ESC. That's January 13th. That's from 6 to 9. Stormwater Advisory Commission will meet January 14th from 6:30 to 8. And I'm happy to remind y'all to register, and everyone watching, please register to attend the virtual youth event, the Martin Luther King youth event. That will be this Saturday, the 16th from 1 to 3. And it is a panel discussion, and the title is He Had a Dream, Are We Living It? So please register and get with me if you need the registration link.
Great. And we have that information on our social media and on our webpage. And so people should be able to find that, the way they can register for that pretty easily. So let's go to Jackie.
I'm not usually one for formalities, but were we supposed to do roll call?
Yes, we are. So let's, we have one or two more calendar kind of things, and then let's do the roll call. And even though we've already voted on one thing, but thank you for that. So yeah, we jumped right over roll call. So very good. I know, Damon, were you going to add something to the calendar?
I just want to mention that tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, there will be a virtual meeting, a monthly meeting of the Durham Chapel Hill Carborough Metropolitan Planning Organization Board.
Great, thank you. Barbara, calendar?
Yes. Today is what? My time is off. The 12th. So Monday, the Chapel Hill Carborough branch of the NAACP will be having a virtual Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration, and the featured speaker is Bishop William Barber. And you can find the link for that on the Chapel Hill Carborough NAACP website. And I think it starts at 11.
Great, thank you. And I'll just say one quick thing. Later in the week, I'm going to issue a proclamation, and it's recognizing that next Tuesday, Kathy, you can help me with this if you want. Next Tuesday at 5:30, so it's January 19, the Presidential Inauguration Committee is urging people across the country at 5:30 on Tuesday to light a candle in their windows, light a candle outside, illuminate buildings, like we're going to illuminate, Town Hall. Church bells ring at 5:30, but it's in recognition of all the lives we've lost to COVID-19. And it's part of some of the kind of activities around the inauguration, which is going to be, of course, next Wednesday. So I'm going to put out a proclamation, and we'll push that out to our folks in Carborough so everyone knows. So Kathy, why don't you go ahead and do the roll call? We'll back up here.
Thank you, Councilmember Gist, for catching that. Right. Mayor Lydia Lavelle.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Foushee.
Here.
Councilmember Jacqueline Gist.
Here.
Councilmember Randy Haven O'Donnell.
Here.
Councilmember Susan Romaine.
Present.
Councilmember Damon Siles.
Here.
And Councilmember Sammy Slade.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Public comments. Kathy, do we have anyone signed up to speak on a matter that's not on the printed agenda?
I have not received any emails from people wishing to speak.
Okay. All right.
Let me check our standing just really quickly. We're good.
All right. Awesome. All right then, Mr. Manager, going on to the consent agenda.
Hey, good evening, Mayor and members of the council. You have 6 items on the consent agenda. The first item is approval of the meeting minutes from November 10th and December the 1st. And Kathy, I believe the amendments by Mayor Lavelle, council members Romaine and Siles. Is that correct?
That's correct. And if y'all want, I can amend the December 1st and send them back for next week. So that way we can look at them again. And then that would leave November 10th with changes from Romaine and Lavelle, and December 1st with changes from Romaine, Siles, and Lavelle. So I'll get those incorporated.
Randy, question about the minutes?
I have a question about the November 10th. Lydia, you sent some changes, and I just want to be sure that what you recommended on the Rogers Road.
Yeah, Randy, actually, for my November 10, there was a sentence that was kind of confusing, Kathy, and I kind of went to reword it because I wasn't sure what we were trying to say. So maybe it might be good if we just bring back both of those minutes next Tuesday.
Yes.
And just if you can just address those, that would be great.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the second item on your consent agenda is for the town's continued participation in the Watch for Me NC program. The third item is a resolution supporting continued participation in the Transportation Demand Management Program. The fourth item would set a public hearing for the B1C and B1G districts to February the 16th. The fifth item would approve extension of the town's emergency paid sick leave policy related to COVID to March 31 of 2021. And the last item would approve the purchase of a solid waste vehicle. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And I think I got emails that we want to pull 2, 3, and 4. Some of you have some comments about them, right? So
I'd like to pull 4 as well.
Okay. All right. So we'll do, is that right, Susan? I know you wanted to pull the 2.
Yes, and I also had I'd like to pull 6. I have a quick question on them.
Okay. All right. Motion for 5.
So moved.
By Barbara, second by Sammy. All in favor, say aye. Randy? Sammy?
Aye.
Me? Aye. Damon?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
Jackie?
Aye.
And then Susan?
Aye.
Okay. All right. So we delayed number 1. Number 2 was the resolution in support of continued participation in Watch for Me NC. So I think, Susan, you had raised a question about that, and Barbara chimed in too.
Yes, and I very much support Barbara's suggestion and the change in the language of this. So I had the opportunity to attend a Carrboro Bicycle Coalition training. I think it was in the spring, and it was for people like me who had not been on a bicycle for many years, and during the pandemic decided to get back on the saddle again. And it was just fabulous, and it was really well attended, and I really appreciated the coalition doing that, which is why I ended up specifically naming Carrboro Bicycle Coalition. But thank you, Barbara, for making this more inclusive. So it would read, whereas Town of Carrboro acknowledges the need to better educate pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers on how to share the road safely. The addition would be, and will continue to work with partner organizations such as our local cycling group in promoting bicycle safety training, especially during the pandemic, as more residents are riding bicycles for the first time or are returning to bicycling after a long hiatus.
Okay. Susan, hang on just a minute. And this is similar to the language you sent out earlier with Barbara's change, right?
It is, and I sent that language to Kathy.
Okay, great. And also, Susan, you were coming in and out a little bit. Just want you to know that it was a little hard to hear you. So, but I think we all got the gist of what you were saying, and I can make out most of it. And if it's exactly the language you sent with some of the additions of Barbara, I think we're probably good on that language. So does anyone have any questions or comments for Susan and or Barbara about that? So if not, do you want to move the resolution, Susan, with that language?
So moved.
So moved. Second by Barbara. All in favor, say aye. Randy?
Aye.
Danny? Aye.
Aye.
Damon?
Aye.
Me? Aye. Barbara?
Aye.
Jackie?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
All right, very good. All right, so then the next one is the resolution about the Transportation Demand Management Program. I think that was you, Sammy?
Yes. Thank you, David and Trish and Zach, for responding to the questions I had. I would like to have the EAB have an opportunity to look at what Zach comes up with. I think it's a good practice for them to start thinking or continue thinking about, and also the Transportation Advisory Board, transportation demand management strategies, as they're so significant, are greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And this is one avenue and source of funding. So if that could be shared with those advisory boards before it's brought before the council, along with information on how the percentage per capita funding compares to what Chapel Hill will be receiving. And I'm also interested in the specific strategies that the NCDOT plan describes, and what amongst those strategies we will be addressing in Carborough. So essentially, if that could be referred to Transportation Advisory Board and EAB before it's brought again before this council. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sammy. Mr. Manager, you got that?
We do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so Sammy, you want to move the item?
So moved.
I had asked to have that pulled as well.
Okay. Sorry, Jackie, I forgot to write down which one it was. Go ahead.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm going to vote to move this to public hearing, but I don't want that interpreted as meaning that I support it in its entirety. I do have some issues with this ordinance and its implications. I'm voting to move it forward because I want to get the advice from our advisory boards, including the Appearance Commission, the Planning Board, our downtown. So I just want to be clear that voting for a public hearing, from my perspective, is simply voting to hear from the public and to hear from our advisory boards. I want to go on record with that. Thank you.
We're still on number 3, aren't we?
Yeah, there were 2 items that Sammy pulled, and I think you're talking about the one he's going to talk about in a minute.
Okay, so if you would just take everything I just said and move it to number 4.
We will. We'll do that.
We'll be fine.
No, we get that. We get that. That's the one with the public hearing. But the one, number 3, Sammy, you moved that one. And who was our second? Who wants to do second number 3? Damon. So for number 3, all in favor, say aye. Randy?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
Me? Aye. Damon?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
Jackie?
Aye, with no comments. Yeah.
Susan?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Awesome. All right. So now then we're on to number 4. Sammy, go ahead.
Yeah. So number 4, I sent an email to y'all for consideration of an alternative language to the draft that staff has shared with us. Basically, I'm concerned about watering down this ordinance too much, and I think that by being explicit and specific, we can mitigate the slippery slope that happens even with ordinances that we already have in place. But when we set conditions, we open that door up even further. So I'm offering those as a means to try to tighten it up, and perhaps what I'm proposing could just be referred to advisory boards alongside what staff is proposing as an avenue for how to go about this.
Okay. All right. So that's the proposal, is to send along your suggestions along with what staff has in the packet. Damon?
I would support that and like to move the item. And also just agreeing with what Jackie said here is that, the importance of going ahead and scheduling this hearing. I appreciate Sammy's proposals and happy to consider those along with the existing draft ordinance when the time comes for us to do that.
Okay, awesome. So that's a motion by then Damon for that. Sammy, you want to second that?
Sure.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second on that item. No further discussion. All in favor say aye. Randy?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
Me? Aye. Damon,
Aye.
Barbara,
Aye.
Jackie,
Aye.
and Susan.
Aye.
Okay, very good. And then number 6, someone asked us to pull that. I'm sorry, I forgot to write down. Susan, yeah. Okay.
Yes, I have a really quick question. David, I sent an email about this and I didn't get a response, which is the reason I was bringing it up. And when I sent the email, there were other things in the email I might have gotten lost in the shuffle. It was just to find out if there were any other bids on the, other than from OMIC. Is it OMIC Corporation?
I think AMIC or OMIC.
AMIC.
Sure. Yeah, the purchase was made under state contract, and with the North Carolina, and that's under our revised purchasing policies. That's an option that we have, so it does comply, and state contract does a bid. I don't know to what extent the state of North Carolina does look at minority-owned and women businesses, but Arch McAdoo is available, and so is Joe if you have that question, but it does conform to our revised policies and procedures, procurement policies and procedures.
Susan, do you want to hear anything more from Arch or Joe?
No, that's all I needed to know. I just wanted that reassurance. Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And is there it's Barbara?
So Susan, thanks for raising that question, but I'm not quite sure if I'm hearing what I might want to hear. I did hear David mention minority MWBE, to be specific. So in following the process that David is describing, was MWBE even considered? Was it even part of the or are we missing something here? I just want to make sure we have the full picture of the process, because the question Susan has is, I think, wanting to know if MWBE was even a part of the process, or are we just going with businesses we normally work with, or just how all that works.
Well, I'll refer to Joe and or Arch McAdoo for further detail, but I can say that we have the option under our revised procurement policies to go with the state procurement, and that's what this is. So I don't know, Joe or Arch, if you can be a little bit more specific.
So Arch, yeah, Arch and Joe, you're both in the room with us, even though we can't see you. Don't know who wants to. Hey, Joe. Don't know which of you wants to kind of answer Susan and Barbara their inquiry about this.
Yeah, I don't mind taking a crack at it, but I have a feeling if you press me, we'll need Arch to step in and give some real details. But from our perspective, the town policy, including I'm referring to the updated town policy regarding procurement, particularly when we're looking at vendors like for vehicles, slightly different than if we were looking at a contractor. It saves the town a lot of time and money to use state contracts or consortium type contracts. In this particular case, we use the state contract. The state itself, again, you'd have to ask Arch this. I'm not sure what minority and women-owned businesses criteria is in their bidding process. What I do know is that under state law, they were bid by the state for purposes of state use, and of course we can piggyback on that. So that is the avenue that we pursued. I hope that helps. If not, I think we might need Arch to give more detail.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is we followed the state, like we piggybacked or did it through the state procedure. Arch, do you have anything you want to add to that in your understanding of how that purchase happens? Arch, are you out there? I think, Arch, we can't hear you if you're talking.
So I need to unmute.
Now, there you go. Now we can hear you.
Okay. Whenever the state goes out and issues RFPs for its contracts and stuff, the state generally uses its HUB, historically underutilized businesses office, to also get those RFPs and RFQs out to that broader population. Now, whether or not they have established a particular MWBE goal with regards to this particular item, I would have to go and look a little bit further into how the bid was done and what the final outcome was.
Thanks, Arch. Y'all, I'm on that inclusion commission for the governor, and this is one of the things that we've been like tackling and talking about over the last year or two, taking a deep dive into how that operates with state contracting and with standing contracts and standing vendors. So I'd be happy to see what I can find out about that as well, just so we understand a little more how that state process works. So
thank you. I appreciate that, Lydia, Joe, and Arch. And I guess my concern is I hear talk about time and money, and I know how important both of those are, but it's also important for us to make room for minority and women-owned businesses, as much as we can. This goes right along with the direction we're moving, as a council and as a town. So I just wanted to lift that up again. I appreciate the responses and any future information. Thanks.
Thanks, Barbara. All right, thanks, Susan. Anything else, or if not, we could go ahead and move the item if you want. Do you want to go ahead and move the item, Susan?
So moved.
Second by
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Randy?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
Me? Aye. Damon?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
Jackie? And Susan?
Aye.
All right, very good.
Was that Councilmember Romaine and then Councilmember Siles? Did you second that? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Manager, next item.
Okay, so you have 3 items under other matters, and the first item is consideration and possible adoption of the updated gender neutral town code. Mayor.
Okay, so this was a priority for us that we all agreed on, moving forward last year. Having our staff, having our clerks, having our attorney kind of take a real deep look at our town code and make it gender neutral. They also did some other cleaning up along the way. They also looked for any kind of issues related to race too that could be modified. And so my understanding, and this was kind of cool, looking at the agenda abstract, is that there were many, 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 many hours spent on this by staff. And it's very much appreciated, that look at the town code, because there actually is at least one in Greensboro, I think, in North Carolina. I think Greensboro might be also too, Kathy, but there aren't that many codes really across the country that have taken this kind of a dive and gone through to make sure their code is gender neutral. And so, of course, I think, instructed this maybe about this time last year when we first became the Carrboro Town Council and decided to really kind of pull gender out of the code. Really want to thank staff, thank Kathy. It sounds like we had an intern that did a lot of work. And of course, Chris, our previous, deputy town clerk, put a lot of time and effort into this as well. So this could have been on the consent agenda, but I think it's good for us to pull it out here and lift it up and, kind of recognize it, because it's kind of a cool thing that happened. So I don't know if anyone else has any other comments they want to make. Let's go Damon and then Barbara.
Yeah, I just want to echo the thanks to Kathy and everyone else who contributed, including Chris, who's our former deputy clerk. And I know it as somebody who spends a lot of my daytime work hours as doing editing for technical documents. It's something that I really appreciate, the hours and hours that go into it. Kathy, I also just want to say that I appreciate you and the attorney and others working to put together the spreadsheet for us and sending it out way ahead of time so that we had plenty of time to review the substantial changes that were made, in addition to the just sort of more minor changes. So that was really helpful, and I just wanted to thank you for that as well. Thanks for all the hard work.
Great, thank you, Damon. Barbara?
So just following up with what Damon just said, just really lifting up Catherine and the town attorney and the UNC intern, previous deputy town clerk Chris Milner for the hundreds of hours that went into getting this document gender neutral, and also want to lift up the racial equity review, even though it was done, preliminary. I appreciate that as well, and look forward to using the toolkit later on whenever it becomes available. Again, thank you so much for all of your work with making this document gender neutral and other. Thanks.
Thank you, Barbara. Randy.
Yeah, I really appreciate the work that went into this. The town code is a bear. It's just a bear. And to know that the dedication to the detail work to go through it and to assess and make it gender neutral is quite an undertaking. So, Kathy, attorneys, Chris Milner, if you're out there, the interns, it's a work well worth doing because it speaks to the very core of what we stand for. So thank you.
Thank you, Randy. All right. If there are no further comments, we need to adopt the ordinance that finalizes this, the code. So
I'll move it if you want.
So we have a motion from Randy to adopt the ordinance. Second by Damon. If there's no further comment, all in favor say aye. Randy?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
Me? Aye. Damon?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
Jackie?
Aye.
And Susan?
Aye.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. All right. Next item, Mr. Manager.
Okay. So Mayor and members of the council, the next item on your agenda is an ordinance amending Chapter 8 of the Town Code to prohibit discrimination in employment and in places of public accommodations.
All right. Thank you, David. So y'all, we set this in motion in March of 2016, right after HB2 was passed. And so you can read the abstract and we can have a little discussion here. At this time, I think I'd like to turn it over to Damon to kind of talk through the abstract just a little, and then I want to hear from folks about this. Damon.
Thanks, Lydia. As Lydia said, we tried to include the background information you would need here in the agenda abstract, getting some of the history that all of you know already, and most of you will remember back in March of 2016, 3 days after the General Assembly passed House Bill 2, that this council held a special meeting that was attended by probably one of the fullest rooms we've had when certainly in the last several years on the town council, of people coming out to witness and to be a part of our call for repeal of that legislation. So that was a good day for Carrboro, and hopefully a good day for a lot of other communities in North Carolina. But a lot of other jurisdictions around the state did the same thing. And in many of our resolutions calling for repeal of House Bill 2, we indicated that we were committing ourselves to finding the next opportunity to adopt local ordinances as appropriate to advance equal protection and non-discrimination. And so the relevant section of the so-called replacement bill, House Bill 142, expired last month on December 1st. And here we are with our local ordinance. And so I really just want to say a couple of things about that. First, just as I've talked to folks around town, in the limited opportunities we now have to actually see people in person, it's been really interesting to me to hear how many people remember us having that meeting nearly 5 years ago, and who remember us making this commitment to our neighbors. So that's been pretty gratifying. And second, just want to thank Lydia for really the leadership role she's played over the last 5 years, and certainly over the past year, especially in representing us and representing our town in conversations with our counterparts around the state, so that all of our counterparts understood what this opportunity meant for our communities to take this action. So glad that we're following in the footsteps of Hillsborough, who adopted a similar ordinance last night. And tomorrow night, our colleagues in Chapel Hill will consider a similar ordinance. Next week, both Orange County and the city of Durham will consider non-discrimination ordinances. And there will be more to come after that. So keep your eyes and ears open. So happy to try to answer any questions that I think Lydia and I and probably Brady can help answer around the ordinance. But we try to keep it straightforward, comprehensive, simple, and to the point. So I hope we achieve that.
Thanks, Damon. Thank you. There's a couple of things I'd like to just have Brady address with us. A couple of questions came up during the meeting last night, I know, in Hillsborough. And, one was, whether we indeed had the authority to actually introduce this and pass it on the same evening. And the second was just kind of the enforcement mechanism, if you will. And so, Brady, we would love you to kind of talk about that a little bit, so we understand, and so members of the public also understand.
Sure. So to answer your first question is yes, since this is an amendment to the code and not, let's say, the zoning ordinance, the public notice, I guess, requirements don't really apply here. So you can go and introduce it and adopt it on the same day, which I would assume is the intent of this board, but again, that's up to you all. And then going into the enforcement mechanisms that we have chosen here, I know that Nick and some of you all on the board and town staff have been looking at this, and really we've come up with sort of two main remedies, which would be a misdemeanor and an injunction. And the reason why we chose those is those are the most, I guess, enforceable type of remedies in the sense that they're expressly authorized by statute, so they're beyond attack. I guess the third enforcement mechanism would be civil penalties. And at this point, we just don't think those would be very effective in this case. Number one, it really boils down to civil penalties. What is reasonable for a civil penalty? If it's too nominal, let's say $50 for the first offense, $100 for the second, $250 for a third, just like a noise ordinance, well, it's going to cost you more in attorney's fees to try to go and collect that money in terms of enforcing through a civil penalty route. And so it's essentially just a slap on the wrist. Take it on the other extreme, if you did an extremely high amount of a civil penalty, let's say it's $1,000 or $5,000, well, then you're getting into a challengeable unreasonableness of these civil penalties. So you're running the risk of more attack on the ordinance, which is why we chose to go down these two routes. And so, so one being criminal with the misdemeanor, which actually brings with it a $300 fine. And then the other would be an injunction where the town would go and actually bring a lawsuit. And the judge would go and try to not only stop the discrimination from occurring, but try to go and abate and rectify the discrimination, and honestly, that's done on a case-by-case basis. So the sort of the remedy with the injunction, could be that the person is entitled to their paycheck back, or they get reinstated with their job. I mean, that is very fact-specific and case-by-case basis. But I think here with these remedies, they are strong, and like I said before, they're expressly authorized by statute. So I hope that answered the question there, but be happy to provide any more information or input.
No, that's great, Brady. Thank you. Let me just make a couple of comments. One is, with regard to the public notice, I think that the town has had notice for 3 years that we're going to do this. But number two is not that I necessarily anticipate we'll have any number, if any large number of folks who are violating this, but I kind of feel like we understand it's such a strong value to this community that we wanted to have some teeth in it. And because we know that this is also an ordinance that, others might see and look at and try to replicate or duplicate. The other is, I know, and Damon, you could add on to this if you want, but there are some larger jurisdictions that might have the other options, perhaps, of going through a Human Relations Commission or something like that. We're, smaller type jurisdiction. It made sense for us to go this route. So, Damon, do you have anything to add to that I've missed on our thinking about that?
No, I think that's right. I mean, we know that our Carborough's needs, other jurisdictions have different ways of doing things. Their codes look different in some ways. They're structurally different. They have different authorities granted through the state, all of those kinds of things. So we knew that each jurisdiction that wanted to pursue a non-discrimination ordinance like this one would need to tailor it to their own code and to their own other mechanisms that they may have in place. And so, for example, you may see with Orange County next week that their ordinance will rely in part on their existing Human Relations Commission, on which Carrboro has a representative, and go that route for part of the enforcement mechanism. So every jurisdiction will do it a different way, and this seemed like the way for Carrboro to do it because it fits well into the way that we enforce other ordinances, as Brady said.
Great, thank you.
Well said.
So when we end up at the end voting, I have some other comments I want to make, but first I know others might have some things that they want to say. I'll start with Jackie and then Barbara and then Susan.
Thank you. I want to thank Damon and Lydia and Brady for all the hard work you put in to this ordinance that really reflects Carrboro's values. I want to speak a moment as a Christian. That does not mean that I don't value the opinions or thoughts or anything of people who aren't Christian. We have gotten, but I feel like I need to do this because we've gotten well over 100 emails from Christians that are entitled, Oppose Anti-Religious Liberty Ordinance. Religious liberty to me means the liberty to believe what you want to believe. It means liberty and freedom from religion as much as it means liberty and freedom to have religion. And it certainly means liberty to interpret your religion the way that you see fit. To me, and again, I'm speaking not as a council person, but as a Christian, the push out there to limit people's religious faith and how they live it is really, really dangerous. It means working towards a state religion. What we're doing here is working towards a government that's free from religion. I personally feel that faith is meaningless if you're told that you have to have it. And I certainly don't agree with the brand of Christianity that people who are opposing limits on religious liberty are putting out there. I think most importantly, to me personally, the most important piece of scripture is in Matthew, where they said, which is the greatest commandment of the law? And Christ said, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy soul and all thy mind. This is first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Of these two commandments hang all the law and prophets. So I think that in enacting an ordinance which enforces loving thy neighbor as you love thyself is following Christ's word. And I'm proud of our town. Again, that is my personal religion. It would be meaningless if I pushed it on anybody else, because faith is only faith when it comes from the heart. So to these 100 and some people, and as far as I can tell, none of them live in Carrboro, I honor and respect your right to live your faith how you see fit. And I only ask that you also honor and respect other people's right to live their faith or a life without faith, which is neither good nor bad, the way we do yours. And just as a side, if you're going to lobby people, don't send the same email. Come up with your own. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, good advice. Thank you for your words. We'll go on to Barbara and then Susan.
Thank you so much, Jackie. You really just kind of preach the sermon. I'm about to give you another title. Okay. But thank you so much. You expressed a lot of what I was thinking and feeling in my heart. And, coming from where I come from in my space in the world, I know about discrimination and oppression. And I know how that feels, and how it makes me feel on the inside. And it's just not a good feeling. But to the ordinance, straightforward, check, simple, check. I just want to lift up number one, just some of it. Discrimination means any difference in treatment based on race, natural hair or hairstyles, ethnicity, creed, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. This is how the ordinance starts out, which I absolutely love. Thank you to Damon and to Mayor Lavelle for all the work that they put into this ordinance. Shout out to Hillsborough for getting it done and starting the ball rolling last night. Let's get it done tonight. And as Councilmember Gist just said, love thy neighbor as thyself. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. All right, moving on then to Susan.
Well, Barbara, that's a hard act to follow, as is Jackie's. So I just want to say, first of all, I really do just feel so honored to have this opportunity to vote on the ordinance tonight. It's a real privilege for me to get to do this. I know from reading some of the materials, Orange County really has a long history of being of enacting some of the most progressive LGBTQ policies in the state. And so this week, Damon, maybe it's just only fitting that here we have Town of Carrboro joining Chapel Hill, Hillsborough, Orange County, being first out of the box with this ordinance. The non-discrimination protections have a broad reach, applying to work settings as well as all kinds of places of accommodation, whether it's stores and hotels and restaurants and clinics and hospitals. So yes, I too want to give a round of thanks, beginning with Mayor Lavelle, Councilmember Siles. I want to thank our two town attorneys, Brady and Nick, for all of the work you've done behind the scenes. I also want to thank, as we've mentioned, we're part of a team here in Orange County doing this, and I want to thank Hillsborough Commissioner Matt Hughes and Chapel Hill Town Council member Karen Stegman for bringing similar ordinances before their elected bodies. As Jackie said, these ordinances really do reflect the values and the priorities of our community, and I really think that they will help us create a more supportive, a more inclusive, a more welcoming place for all of us to call home. So again, I am honored to have this opportunity to cast my vote in favor of this ordinance. And I'm looking forward to seeing lots of other local governments across the state follow suit in 2021. Thank you, you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. All right, let's go. Let's see, Randy and Sammy.
Yeah, I can't do better and top all the wonderful things that have been said. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Susan. This is who we want to be, and this is who we are. And thank you for all the work, Lydia and Damon, and our colleagues across the county for making this reality for us.
Thanks, Randy. Sammy?
Yeah, I want to echo a lot of what's been said, and I'm very grateful, a lot of gratitude for serving on this council with leaders such as Lydia and Damon, leading in the state on countering some of the things that unfortunately some people aren't tapping into their hearts, as Jackie's pointing out to, and that unfortunately is being expressed at these other levels, and it's such a privilege to live in a county and be on a council and supported by citizens who understand what love means in terms of acceptance and seeing each other. And so I'm very grateful and glad to be on this council and voting on this tonight. And also to staff for all the work that they've done, our attorneys.
Thank you, Sammy. Damon, do you want to say anything before I go? Anything else? Anything additional?
Well, I would first just like to thank everyone. Lydia and I, of course, knew that coming before you with this was going to be a happy experience, and it was going to be exactly what you've all made sure that it is. So thank you. I would like to move that we adopt the ordinance and get done with the work of the town.
All right. So motion by Damon, second by Jackie. I want to say just a couple things before we vote on it, y'all. And you know me, I'm going to bring in just a couple of legal points about this ordinance. Although I did like the Christian perspective, Jackie. Jackie and I go to the same church. Our reverend would be very proud of you. That was great. So one point I want to make is that, you know, we're doing what we're doing because we don't have statewide protections, right? I mean, December 1st, 2020, HB 142 expired. And so now it's up to local governments to kind of fill the gaps because we don't have this at the state level. And so I think that's something important to tell folks. And another point I want to make is, so that makes us the 48th state that has either statewide or local protections. So we were really an outlier when we had the inability to do this until December 1st. All right, 48 states. 47 other states either have statewide protections like this or allow their cities, counties, towns to do this. And so this is not like some odd thing that we're suddenly allowed to do here in North Carolina, okay? Another thing I'd like to say is that there's a couple of Supreme Court cases that I think further bolster the timing of these types of ordinances, if not years ago, but certainly now. One of the emails that we've been getting is kind of saying, you know, we don't have to fill in these gaps, for instance. Last summer, the United States Supreme Court passed this case. It's called the Bostock case. But what it essentially said was that LGBTQ people are covered under Title VII, that's employment discrimination in the workplace. And so some of what we've been getting, folks have said, you know, you don't even need to do this anymore. Bostock covered that. Well, Bostock covered Title VII, which is employees places that have employees of 15 people or more. Okay. And so some of what we're doing with this ordinance we're doing like what's called filling in the gaps between what is covered at the federal level and what still could happen at the state level or local level with smaller businesses, for example. So I wanted to make that point about Bostock, but the holding and the reasoning of Bostock is very, very clear. You know, LGBTQ people are entitled to the same civil rights under the Civil Rights Acts as all the other protected classes are that are listed in that act. So I wanted to make that reference. And the other is just with regard to the Establishment Clause and just with regard to the right to religious freedom and independence. And some of you touched on this. I completely support that, right? But I'm reading right from the Masterpiece case. And some people like to kind of misstate what the Masterpiece United States Supreme Court case said. But this is a really thoughtful opinion by Justice Kennedy, where the court did not have any type of definitive holding on that specific case, other than to say that there were some procedural errors, and so they kicked it back. But the court goes out to talk about the First Amendment does ensure that religious organizations and people are given proper protections. Okay, nevertheless, while those religious and philosophical objections are protected, it is a general rule that such objections do not allow business owners and other actors in the economy and in society to deny protected persons equal access to goods and services under a neutral and generally applicable public accommodations law. I mean, this is language right from the Masterpiece case. Churches, synagogues, 100% religious places, that's a different matter, okay? So some of what we've been getting kind of misconstrues and misstates a lot of that. So I really wanted to get it here on the record in my, I suppose, professorial manner. So, all right. So we have a motion by Damon and we have a second by Jackie. If there's no further discussion, then we'll take a vote. So all in favor, say aye. Randy.
Aye.
Sammy.
Aye.
Me. Aye. Damon.
Aye.
Barbara.
Aye.
Jackie.
Aye.
And Susan.
Aye.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Good work. All right, Mr. Manager, next item.
Okay, Mayor and members of the council, the next item on your agenda is a report from OWASA regarding their long-range water supply. And Todd Taylor, their executive director, I believe will be the one to make the presentation.
Yeah, Mr. Andrews, this is Ruth Rouse. I'm OWASA's Planning and Development Manager, and I will actually be doing the presentation this evening. Todd Taylor, our Executive Director, is available on this call as well.
Hi, Ruth, and hello, Todd. Good to have you both with us this evening. So thanks for being here. So Ruth, you can take it away however you want. I imagine, Kathy, are you sharing your screen or whatever? So
I will share my screen if it works. If not, then Kathy will take it over. And I do really appreciate you all having us here this evening. Can you all see that?
We can't see anything yet. So
Let me go here. Can you see that?
Nope.
No. Wonder if I'm just not patient enough. Oh.
There we go.
There you go.
All righty.
Okay.
Now if I can get it into presentation mode. All righty. And now you see it in presentation mode?
We do. Ready to go. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I know you all are busy, so I'll try to fly through this. We are in the process of updating our long-range water supply plan. And this is one of our strategic initiatives, and it is really important to OWASA that we get feedback from the community on this plan. So we wanted to meet with you all this evening and provide information on what we've done to date and get any questions and feedback from you all on that, as well as receive any feedback and suggestions from you as we move forward with the process. So there's three things I'd like you to get out of this evening's presentation. One is we have really great news to share with you all, and that is we are really at low risk of running out of water. The second one is that we do have a vulnerability, and that's if we got into an extended drought. And with climate change, that is a vulnerability that we would like to address. And the third point is that Jordan Lake appears to be the most cost-effective solution for increasing our resiliency in terms of water supply. And we do have several alternatives that we can look at in terms of using our Jordan Lake supply. Show you this chart, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing with you. I want you to get kind of 2 points out of it. This is the process to develop the long-range water supply plan. And the first point I want you to get is that it is a cycle. It is a circle, so we don't just finish this and then we don't have to look at this again for 50 years. No, we will every 5 to 10 years at least look at our demands. And the second point I want you to recognize is that we are now in step 7 with the community engagement. And we started this community engagement step back in October. I appeared on our wonderful water segment with Aaron Keck, and the main point of that segment was to advertise a webinar that we held with the community back in November. And then we are meeting with each of the elected boards. You're the first one out. We are meeting with the town of Chapel Hill tomorrow, and then the Board of County Commissioners in February. We felt it was important to bring to you because we want to get feedback from the elected boards, but we also thought it was another public forum where the community could see what we were doing with the long-range water supply plan, and they can learn how they can comment on it as well. So to make sure everyone's on the same equal playing field here, I wanted to let you all know where we currently get our water. And we have 3 local water supply sources here in Orange County, and those are Cane Creek Reservoir at the western part of the county, University Lake, just here in Carborough, and the Corey Reservoir. We also have an allocation of water from Jordan Lake, and that is a federal multi-purpose reservoir that Congress designated several uses for it, and one of them being water supply. And OWASA has had an allocation of water from Jordan Lake since the first round of allocations was done in 1988. Our practice, though, has been to only use that allocation during water shortages. And I think it's really important to note that we don't have any guaranteed access to it, so we can't necessarily know that we're going to be able to get that water when we need it in the future. The other thing I really wanted to have you all understand is that this community has done a really great job with managing their demands and in conservation. So the blue line on this graph shows our customer accounts. So it's indicative that we have been continually growing in the community. And then the green line is our water sales in million gallons per day. And you can see that at the beginning of that green line, it was steadily going up. And then we hit the droughts of 2001-02 and 2007-08. And our customers really changed their behaviors, and they continue to have those water conservation behaviors. And part of that is by the rates that we put in place that encourage that conservation. The other big thing that happened was that UNC partnered with us in response to those droughts to develop the reclaimed water system. Reclaimed water is the use of highly treated wastewater, and then it's then used for non-drinking water purposes. The university uses it for things like cooling buildings, irrigation, toilet flushing. Something that's not shown on this graph, because it does not show up in our water sales, is we also recycle water at our water treatment plant. The reclaimed water system saves us about 10% in raw water, or what we need from our water supplies, and that recycle system saves about 7% of what we would need in our water supplies. So this is the graph of the really good news. The blue line shows our yield, historic, and what we project. We currently have about 10.5 million gallons per day that we can supply the community. We do have plans to expand the Corey Reservoir, and when that expansion is complete in the mid-2030s, we'll be able to provide about 12.6 million gallons per day. And then the black solid line is our projected water demands, the baseline demand. And then we recognize that when we're looking out 50 years, that there's a lot of uncertainty in those numbers. And so our engineering consultant did an uncertainty analysis, and that is shown by the gray shading on that band. And I do want to point out that even though that blue line seems to imply that we're confident in it, there is uncertainty in that as well. So that graph shows that our risk to our water supply is low. And I really want to thank the predecessors that came before us for setting us up. You know, back in the 70s, we bought that quarry, and in the 80s, we had everything in place to put Cane Creek Reservoir, fill that, as well as getting that Jordan Lake allocation. And then in terms of conservation, you know, over the last couple decades, the community has done a lot, as we saw in that prior graph. However, we do have a vulnerability. The blue lines on this graph show the watershed around Cane Creek Reservoir and around the Corey Reservoir, and they each have about the same size watershed area. They're each about 30 square miles. But Cane Creek Reservoir holds about 7 times the amount of water that University Lake does. So if it gets drawn down, it takes a long time for it to refill. And so that's our vulnerability, is that if we got into an extended drought and then had another drought occur before we were had recovered from that. And with climate change, we feel like we do want to address that vulnerability so that we can position the folks generations ahead of us to have that adequate water supply. So we looked at several different alternatives, and we evaluated each of those against the 3 pillars of sustainability. And we narrowed kind of a field of any big ideas that people had. And we did meet with the staff at the local governments as well as at UNC. And then OWASA narrowed the field at a staff level, looking at kind of a high level analysis and taking that analysis to our board of directors to come up with a smaller list of alternatives that we could do an apples to apples comparison against those 3 pillars of sustainability. And our alternatives fall into 2 main buckets. We had demand management alternatives, which are ones that either encourage conservation or increase the use of reclaimed water. And those, that gray shaded line or area on that one graph would be pushed down a little bit. Alternatively, also looked at supply alternatives, which create more yield, which would push the blue line on that graph up. So in terms of demand management alternatives, we looked at expanding or the use of reclaimed water at UNC as well as within the community. And then we also looked at programmatic strategies that we could bundle together that would save water. Those that had capital costs with them were not cost effective. And the other ones that were cost effective really did not move the needle very much. However, we recognize that the community really is committed to conserving water, and we want to help support that. So we will be considering cost-effective strategies in a water conservation plan that will serve as a companion document to that long-range water supply plan. In terms of supply options, they fell into different buckets again. I mentioned that we already have plans to expand our quarry. We also looked at putting a new intake and some new transmission infrastructure in to access deeper depths of that quarry. And that had a really high capital cost, and it also does not diversify our water supply. We have to refill the quarry with water from Cane Creek, so that does not help address that vulnerability. In terms of potable reuse, some of those look promising. However, the ones that look promising are not legal in North Carolina at this time, and so those came off the list. And that left us with Jordan Lake, and those we do feel like meet our long-term needs and helps diversify our water supply. The capital costs for those were lower than capital costs for other options that we looked at. And there are different ways that we can access Jordan Lake that would have different cost implications to the community and different levels of control. So where do we go from here? We'll be talking to the board of directors, summarizing the comments that we hear this evening and from the community throughout that engagement process. And we'll be doing that at one of their March meetings. And the board wants us to come up with guiding principles to help them further evaluate those Jordan Lake alternatives. And we'll be doing that later this spring, early summer. And then the next fiscal year, we'll look at the different Jordan Lake alternatives and try to put some meat on some of those. We didn't cost all of them out. And then we'll be selecting our draft preferred alternative and bringing that back out to the community along with the draft long-range water supply plan to get comments on. And then based on those comments, we'll consider those and develop the final plan with a preferred alternative. So with that, I'm going to leave that open for questions and comments from you all. And also if you're like me, you might think next week, oh, I should have asked her this. Please don't hesitate to reach out and ask me that question. And that also goes for any community members that might be listening or hearing about this.
Okay, great, Ruth. Thank you for the presentation. That was succinct, yet it was really a lot of information, and I actually took it all in and appreciate it. Let's see, we have Barbara, and then Jackie, and then Susan, and then Damon.
Thank you, Ruth. It's good to see you again. Would you mind going back to the slide that had the stop signs on it?
This one or the one before?
This one right here. So when I look at the slide, preliminarily, I'm thinking that the deep quarry and the potable reuse, for the reasons stated, are not really options that OWASA would be leaning towards, and that you're leaning more towards the Jordan Lake alternatives with some fine tuning. I'm just trying to make sure that that's what I'm seeing and hearing.
Yeah, that's kind of our analysis to date. And then we will look at Jordan Lake. And one of those Jordan Lake alternatives is just continuing with our mutual aid agreements, which is it's a little risky. There's no cost involved with it, but we also run the risk that at a future round of allocations, we could have it reduced or rescinded. But then there they run the gamut of having a full partner in the Western Intake Partner new intake and plant on the western side of Jordan Lake. And then also looking at new type of agreement, which wouldn't have a capital cost, but we might pay the Western partners a certain amount of money on an annual basis, and they would guarantee us money or guarantee us an annual amount, but we might not take it because we have a lot of supply storage in Cane Creek. We could take it during non-peak times. And so that may be a cost or been a cost-effective way to get to that Jordan Lake allocation. But
I'm sorry,
all
go
your
ahead.
questions there. So
Yeah,
you want to look at those three alternatives in more detail.
Okay. So remind me who the western side partners are, the west side partners?
Yeah, sure. So they're the City of Durham, Chatham County, and the town of Pittsboro, as well as Owasso.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Barbara. Jackie, Susan, Damon, and then Sammy, and then Randy.
Thank you, Ruth. This is a really excellent, clear presentation, and I appreciate that. I also appreciate all of the hard work that Owasso does. I think it's one of the smartest organizations in town, if not the smartest. And I really appreciate that. That said, I've been around a while. I remember, and actually my first vote was protecting the University Lake watershed. The University Lake watershed, and not just that, but all the zoning that's been done throughout Orange County to protect University Lake and Cane Creek water quality has changed how we look. It's increased the cost of housing. It has limited building. It's been very expensive. And for good reasons, to keep our water pristine. Owasso is one of the largest landowners here to keep our water pristine. I was involved for 120 hours in the facilitated negotiations over the quarry in order to secure the quarry. It was 120 hours. I had insisted that we meet with the neighbors to talk about the impact on the neighbors of the quarry and to come up with mitigation. That has been expensive, and for good reasons. And I'm glad we did it. All that said is that our community has gone through great sacrifices to on the advice of Owasso in many different realms to preserve the quality of our water. The water going into Lake Jordan does not have the same protection. And over the past couple years, I would argue probably 10 years, the quality of water in Lake Jordan has decreased. If it has decreased because of legislation not willing to protect it. I know that we periodically get water from Lake Jordan through Durham. We get it through our it maybe goes to Boston before it gets here. I don't know, but it's not a given water supply. It's not something that we depend on a daily basis. All this by way of saying that I find this a little bit troubling. And if we begin getting water on a regular basis, more and more from Lake Jordan, how do we then justify our watershed protection ordinances, the ownership of Owasso of so much land? I can walk around and swim in Lake Jordan. I can't walk around or swim in University Lake, can't swim in or put a motorboat in Cane Creek. So I feel like by becoming more and more dependent on Lake Jordan, we would be undermining our arguments for keeping for working towards a pristine, a very expensive, pristine water supply here. And so those are my concerns. And I could hear arguments coming out 10, 15 years down the line if we are using Lake Jordan on more frequently and to a greater degree. I can hear arguments from the development community saying, why are you protecting this land when you're getting your water from Lake Jordan that's not nearly as pristine? So I think it undermines our arguments for maintaining the pristine watershed that OWASA has lobbied for so many years. I know it's complicated. I know it's expensive, but I think that's an argument that you'll be hearing, or concern you'll be hearing from people other than myself. Again, thank you, and I appreciate all the work OWASA does.
All right, thank you for those comments.
Thank you, Jackie. Going on then to Susan, then Damon, then Sammy, then Randy.
For those comments, Jackie, and thank you so much for your presentation tonight, Ruth.
You're welcome.
It was really, really helpful. So I have a question. It's not directly related to your presentation, but it does. It is a question about sort of long-term water conservation. I'm curious if OWASA has any kind of graduated fee structure. So in other words, if I'm a homeowner with an underground sprinkler system, and I'm using lots of water, will I be paying a hefty premium on that heavy water use compared to somebody who's using water to brush their teeth and bathe and wash the dishes and that kind of thing?
Yes, we do have an increasing rate structure that was implemented after the 2007-2008 drought. So yeah, so the more water you use, the more you're paying per gallon.
And
so
how many tiers? How many tiers are there, Ruth?
There's 5, 4,
Mm-hmm.
5.
Okay. And do you, I'm just sort of curious, folks who have irrigation systems with very heavy water use, how much more would they be paying per gallon of water compared to somebody who's using water just to meet their most basic needs?
We can provide you our rates so you can see how they're broken out, and there are some heavy water users. Most folks are not in this community.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Would I find that on your website, or?
Yeah, our rates and fees are included on our website.
I'll look it up. Okay.
But I can also send Kathy that information as well.
One more question. I'm just sort of real curious about the graduated fee structure. So has it always been since 2007, 2008? It's been the same fee structure, or have there been some additions and tiers over the years? I'm just sort of kind of curious.
I would have to research that because I don't think the number of tiers haven't changed since I've been here. I mean, our rates have gone up since I've been with OWASA, but the tiers have stayed the same. But I don't know if they were different than that when it was first implemented. I'd have to look into that.
That's all I've got for you. Thank you so much for all of your help tonight.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, Susan. Damon, then Sammy, then Randy.
Thanks, Lydia and Ruth. Thank you. Echo the thanks for your presentation and appreciation for how clear it was and informative and brief. So thanks for that. I think I want to echo some of what Jackie shared about kind of her own experience of previous conversations about OWASA and the topic of going to Jordan Lake. And Jackie summarized a lot of that history. Really, even just within the past several years, that a big conversation occurred in the community, and particularly between, I think, Carrboro and OWASA about the emergency use of water from Jordan Lake and the allocation that you discussed a minute ago. So I guess I bring that up simply to say that I think remember, a lot of folks are going to remember that conversation happened, and it was at times a pretty what's the right word?
Contentious.
There was some discussion. It's a heated discussion about that
contentious
topic. Right. And so I think, just being aware and acknowledging that conversation has occurred, and that there are folks who have feelings about this topic, as Jackie said. So this brings me to my question about, you mentioned the public engagement process that you all are engaged in. If you could say just a little bit more about what public engagement is planned around this topic, and how or whether you will be acknowledging or addressing the previous conversation that had a few years ago. I would say it was probably 8 or so years ago, sounds about right, about the accessing of Jordan Lake water. Second comment or question is, just want to clarify, is the idea that accessing water from Jordan Lake in those out years, and the graph that you showed in that sort of 50-year long range, right, in that study, was looking at this need or potential need for supply in drought conditions or whatever, if we're not able to resupply Cane Creek or the quarry. Does that then mean that going to Jordan Lake would continue to only be in emergencies? The previous conversation that was had around this topic was about limiting use of water from Jordan Lake to emergency situations. So I just wanted to ask for a little bit of clarification around that. And then the third and final question is, or comment really, is just to, I'll leave that one aside. It's really related to the first one, which is I think some folks, because so much of the previous conversation about long-term needs, supply needs with OWASA have been around the fact that we all knew that the quarry was going to be coming online in 2030 or so. I think people sort of assumed that was the long-range plan, right? That the quarry was going to meet our needs in the long term. And I think one of the reactions I had in reading the report in the agenda packet was just a little bit of feeling like I was receiving a lot of new information about a need that, we've always talked to the community about long-term OWASA needs, and now we were going to solve those needs with the quarry. And now it turns out that that's not going to meet our long-term needs. And I know that we're looking out at a farther time horizon here, but I think it again goes to that conversation with the public about what expectations have been set in previous conversations with the public about long-term supply, and now having to reset expectations about that. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that was a lot.
Look, I get wordy. Sorry about that.
Make sure I'm understanding. So in terms of what, the webinar really, it had more information in, or a little bit more detail in it in terms of the alternatives in particular than what I included in the presentation for you this evening. But I did not go into the history on Jordan Lake. I mean, that was before my time at OWASA. However, I had heard about it. So we did not go into that history in that particular webinar. And in response to your question of that the quarry was supposed to be our long-term needs, I know in the 2010 plan, it did say the quarry is what we're doing next. But again, we're looking out 50 years. We have had that allocation of water from Jordan Lake since 1988. So I think, the plans early on seem to have been that we were going to use Jordan Lake at some point. And this graph shows that we don't really need it yet under most circumstances. So I would not anticipate that we would be using a whole lot of water from Jordan Lake. We're going to rely on our local supplies. However, I also do think it depends on kind of what option we end up, how those Jordan Lake options fall out against each other as well.
Yeah, thanks. That's helpful. And if you could just mention, probably the most important question I asked that was buried in all of my other ones, not as important. So I apologize for how wordy I am. But just this process of public engagement, how are you going to be engaging the public on this? And I feel like it's going to be pretty important.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're in a pandemic, so we did do the webinar. We've got information out on our website, letting people know that they can comment. We will be doing kind of a list of FAQs on our website as well. And just, yeah, so those are kind of the main, and then bringing this information to each of the elected boards, knowing, that there are people that go to your meetings that may not have heard about the webinar elsewhere.
Okay. Thank you for that, Ruth. And thanks, Damon, for those questions and the follow-up there. So let's go to Sammy and then Randy.
Hi, Ruth. Thank you for your presentation. Always appreciate all the data that y'all compile, and when thinking about these alternatives, it's really helpful when we're trying to wrap our heads around it. And I think the agenda item included a lot of links to other agenda items that OWASA itself has had, which provides even more detail. 10 years ago, when y'all were doing your long range plans, I'd just come on this board, and that was the conversation that we were having, that Damon and Jackie in part were referring to. One of the contentious aspects was going beyond only emergency use for Jordan Lake. And at that time, OWASA wanted to expand our use because there was a concern, because their line at the time was showing a higher spike than what this line 10 years later is now showing. And they're a little concerned that the conservation measures that were implemented after the droughts weren't going to have sustained effects. And 10 years after that, we have seen that they do. One of my questions at the time was, how come the effects of droughts and the way that it changes people's habits is not taken into account as one of the alternatives for demand management, as it is clearly shown historically to have a major effect in our water consumption? And that's one comment I'd like to provide. I'm a little find it unfortunate that is not included. The value of having a drought every now and then, or at least increasing the rates for a short period, the effect that has on the way that we consume water locally is a very cheap way of foregoing the need to have to do very expensive capital investments to increase our supply. So I'm encouraging you guys to take that seriously as one of the alternatives that you'll be assessing alongside the supply ones that you're now considering on Jordan Lake, because it's very significant. Also, I looked, you guys had a really important graph that shows every 10 years, this graph that you're showing today, and how the projections play out compared to the actual demands. And the trend is always a very conservative outlook. It's always, I understand why, like we don't want to run out of water, but it's always that tension between making sure we don't over invest in capital infrastructure and have that burden carried by our customers in terms of what the water costs, and making sure that there is water. But the fact that this is always trended for the worst makes me think that maybe we're at a point again of thinking prematurely about access to Jordan Lake. And I know that y'all are even going through a process with your OWASA board and rescinding the self-imposed measures on when to access Jordan Lake. Currently, it's only during droughts, but you're telling them you would like to not do that anymore if you're going to pursue these Jordan Lake alternatives. And I think that's a very important thing to share with the community and the public at large, because that was very contentious 10 years ago. And it'll be very surprising if right before you're about to approve or commit to one of these alternatives that depend on Jordan Lake, you say, oh, by the way, we will need to rescind our only accessing Jordan Lake beyond emergency times. So I want you to take note of that too. The other thing is, I saw the graph in one of the presentations y'all shared to the OWASA board showing these alternatives. And one of the alternatives that really ranks really well is the direct potable reuse, except for the fact that it's currently not legal in North Carolina. But the value of it is that it could be implemented much closer to when we will actually, when that curve, like in 2070, because it would be implemented according to your estimations in 2050 versus Jordan Lake, which would be 2030. If you do Jordan Lake in 2030, we're talking about 20 years, 30 years, maybe, probably 40 years of having surplus capacity that we've invested a lot of money towards, that we're not getting customers paying money on because no one's purchasing that water. So I didn't see anything in regard to that small little detail, really big detail, because it represents a major cost commitment for OWASA and our customers. So all that to say, I feel like it's a little too fast to be committing and to Jordan Lake at this time, given what the trends have been, given what the costs represented are. Also, the greenhouse gas mitigation value of the direct potable reuse is much better than Jordan Lake, because we're talking about a lot of pumping. We have a 10-year window to deal with climate change, so to invest on something that's that expensive doesn't make sense. I'm very grateful for y'all and recognizing that in your analysis, but I would hope that you could give that a little more weight than it seems like you are. We have another agenda item this evening, which is about connecting with our legislative delegation, making requests on changes to state code. And we could ask them to be pushing, and we got 50 years to get them to do it, pushing for allowing for the direct potable reuse. And I think that I don't think OWASA should take their foot off the accelerator of that option over these next 10 years. So I very much encourage you to include that as one of the alternatives to pursue, as it seems like the major barrier is the legal one, and I guess the permitting one too. But it is comparable in cost to Jordan Lake, and it will likely be much cheaper in the sense of not committing prematurely into a major investment. The other thing I've heard 10 years ago, I still hear now, is that there's a danger of running a risk of having the Jordan Lake allocation rescinded, and back then too. I don't see why investing in a lot of capital will change whoever's making that decision will change their minds. What they are ultimately going to be looking at is what's the actual demand from each entity. And if you're investing a lot of capital infrastructure into something we don't need because our demand isn't requiring it, I don't think we're going to be fooling them. So I don't buy that argument so well. So just in summary, like 10 years ago, I'm very much encouraging and OWASA to not take, consider this other alternative, and consider the reality of what our projections have been over time, and the necessity of investing prematurely in something like access to Jordan Lake.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Sammy. Good comments. And then Randy. Randy, you're on mute.
Hi, Ruth. Thank you for that concise presentation. Would you go back to the Jordan Lake slide? I appreciate Damon and Sammy reminding us of the committee work that actually Sammy and I were with OWASA representatives on that committee to look at the emergency allocation of water from Jordan Lake. And so, it was quite contentious at the time. There were concerns. But I wanted to know, regarding Jordan Lake, the Triangle J Council of Governments has a Jordan Lake One Water program that I'm a delegate for the town of Carrboro to TJ Cog. I'm also one of the folks that's on the committee that's been working on the One Water report. It's being finalized. And the goal of that report is to create the integrated watershed management and to look at the collaborative improvement of the entire Jordan Lake watershed and restore healthy quality and quantity of water. So I'm just wondering, since the report is not finalized, it's not out, what is OWASA's engagement with that potential program? Because the program is geared, when we talk about public engagement, the report lays out how public engagement can ensure better water quality throughout the entire Jordan Lake watershed. And so, I'm seeing this from the point of view of the work that's being done to offer up this program. I'm not seeing it from your role and OWASA's role. What engagement does OWASA have with this potential regional program?
Yeah, so I had been going to some of the meetings that the TJ-COG had with the Jordan Lake One Water, and is keeping up to date on what's happening. I'm on their mailing list as well, so I do stay tuned in to what's going on there.
And so, do you see that this is something, the program, as TJ-COG is laying it out, is something that can be incorporated? I'm just trying to understand how, for Carrboro, where we have these concerns, in the future, how we can be informed by a regional program to inform, to improve the health of the entire watershed, and how that can impact decisions, not only that we seek to make, but how we engage with OWASA.
Yeah, so I think they don't have a final report from that Jordan Lake One Water yet with the list of recommendations, but I know that, they're looking at what kinds of practices. I know that land conservation is something that they've looked at. I know they've done some modeling to identify areas that might be important to protect. Some of those areas do lie within our local watersheds as well, because we're nested within the Jordan Lake watershed. So I think, the opportunities are still kind of to be determined, and, for eventually our board, as well as the town of Carrboro and Chapel Hill and Orange County, to weigh in on, how they want to participate in kind of restoring the lake.
Mm-hmm. Well, we thought, I'm just going to say this, but we honestly thought we'd have the report done by the beginning of December. And I can't, and that was, we were working on draft 4 at the time. So I hope we're close. I really appreciate Sammy bringing up actually the non-potable water. Susan mentioned the use of irrigation and sprinklers, and so it makes sense to me that at least somewhere in the near future, we could be looking at water that will not be used for drinking to be used in that way. Is that something OWASA's looked at for where there are sprinkler systems and irrigation systems?
Yeah, so UNC does use it for reclaimed water for irrigation. We don't have it going out into the community for irrigation, like of people's lawns and that kind of thing. It does get expensive to extend those pipes, because you have to have a separate transmission infrastructure for that water to go through. So it does get really expensive to pull that out, or send that out into the community.
Okay. Yeah, because and thank you, Sammy, for raising the question of bringing this up to our legislators. I think that's an important thing to do. So, Ruth, I have 2 other questions. One has to do with Cane Creek and the presence of PFAS. How is that being monitored? How, is there a rise in the quantity? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and so Todd, if I misspeak here, please jump in. I do know that we are monitoring at our intakes on a quarterly basis, and all that is on our website. And I know that we've partnered with, through the PFAS monitoring network through the UNC Collaboratory. I know that we've had samples taken there. I don't know if we've gotten the results of those back yet, all of them. So I'll let Todd jump in if he's got better answers for you.
Yeah, a little more detail. We are, as Ruth said, for the past couple of years, we've been taking quarterly samples at our intake as well as our drinking water, our treated drinking water, and at our wastewater treatment plant. What we've seen is that our treatment techniques are very effective at removing the PFAS. That the levels that we see in Cane Creek are not what we see in the drinking water, and our drinking water levels are well below the action levels that have been set. As they're not regulated yet, but there are some health advisory levels, and we are well below that. And then we've also been looking at, because it's interesting to see how many PFASs are actually added back as people use the water for bathing and cleaning and all of that. And then at our wastewater treatment plant, the levels will slightly increase from what the drinking water level was, just because of the introduction of PFAS in. And then we also look at our discharge into Morgan Creek, and we see that there is some effectiveness of our wastewater treatment process on these, but we are not specifically treating for them at this time, but we are monitoring and again, have confidence that our treatment techniques are currently effective, at least based on, there's only 2 health advisory levels for 2 particular PFASs out there. But for those 2 and for the others, we seem to have a very effective treatment process, but it's something that's on our minds and very, very much a concern going forward, just as more PFAS are identified and as testing techniques get better.
Okay, last question, and thank you. This has been excellent. Speaking of wastewater, I thought OWASA was engaged on some level with checking for COVID in wastewater. Is that still going on? And what do you see?
Yes, we have been involved in a study that's led by the Collaboratory, which UNC is a part of, and NC State. And we've provided samples to them, and they've been testing them. Early on, those samples were simply frozen because they didn't have analysts coming in and actually performing tests and things like that. But from what we understand, it's valuable information that they're receiving. They're receiving it from a number of communities all across the state, and actually nationally. I think there's several universities that are working on this, and it is an effective means of identifying COVID. We have been in conversation with the county health department. They, at this time, at the time we were talking about this, they were going to rely more on the actual, test results that they were seeing from people coming in and being tested for COVID at that time. But it is an interesting alternative method for, testing the community for indications of COVID cases and things like that. UNC was also interested in that at one point when they were talking about the students coming back to campus, that was going to be a potential way that they may test dormitories and things like that. But again, they're going to rely also on individual testings. They abandoned that effort, but we are still providing samples. We do hear that there may be additional research done in that and in that regard. And of course, we support that, and we'll provide samples to to them as needed.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think that they should, they should ground truth that the testing with the wastewater results. I honestly think that ultimately that's going to be how they're going to know. So I really appreciate it. I think you're all doing an excellent job of staying on it on all different levels. And Ruth, I look forward to chatting with you once that report comes out. And if I find out ahead of time when it's coming, I'll let you know.
All right,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks to you and Todd.
Thanks, Randy. Just real quick, let me say something. I see Barbara's got her hand up, but I want to say I appreciate all the comments of the council members. I echo a lot of them. I've been an elected official here for 14 years, and I remember that 10 years ago, and especially some of the concerns brought up by Jackie, Randy, Damon, Sammy. Sammy, I also made a note too for our legislative delegation. I think that's an idea. But really appreciate you all kind of getting out on this and getting around and hearing from folks about it. And that history is important, regardless of how we end up moving forward in one way or another with Jordan Lake. That history's, people remember it. So, Barbara, you want to make some more comments?
Yeah, I just had one more comment, and this is just a general comment about community engagement. Going back to what Damon had inquired about. Community engagement is so important, even in the midst of COVID. And the town of Carrboro has had to become really creative and just a little bit more aggressive, to make sure that our community is engaged and knows, what we're doing. And so regardless of the option that OWASA chooses, the alternative, I know me and probably the rest of my council members, we do hope that you will put forth a good bit of effort to engage the community in any way possible, because I as you've heard tonight, I'm sure that the feelings, about the Jordan Lake allocation, they're still there. And as soon as this comes up, I rest assured you will start to hear from people, and we have to, engage the community so that they know what's going on. So I know you have a new communications person over there, and I know the board has a communication committee, and I just encourage you to just utilize every avenue to engage our community. And thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for your wonderful work. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I don't think do we have an action item on this, Kathy?
No, there's no action other than just receiving the report.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So thank you all again for coming to us, visiting with us. Sammy, you have a comment before we close?
Yeah. I just want to thank you all for your presentation, and I will take you up on your offer. I've got a couple of pending questions I'd love to shoot over email. And lastly, I would like, last time this happened, we communicated with our representatives on the OWASA board, and so I'd like to propose that as a council, we find a time to put our heads together on how we see this proposal or how it's going, and communicate with our OWASA representatives before. Maybe Ruth, you can let us know kind of what your timing is on when OWASA board will be voting on preferred alternative at some point.
Well, let me just say,
it'll be definitely next fiscal year.
Okay. And let me just chime in here too and say, Sammy, I know we have a regular kind of placeholder for when we do have our OWASA reps come and speak to us. So Kathy, I imagine there's sometime here in the spring where we'll definitely have a meeting with our reps, right? So we'll be sure to talk about it at that time too. So
great, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Again, thank you all for being with us this evening. I think that's the end of this item. So we'll move on to Mr. Manager, on to our next item.
Thanks, Ruth.
Hey, Mayor and members of the council, the next item on your agenda is a public hearing to discuss the principal building design features of the 203 South Greensboro project. And I believe Trish will just make a brief introduction before she turns it over to Perkins and Will. So Trish or Derek Jones, come on over. However you want to do it.
All right, I brought over Derek and Victor Stevens. So, Derek, if you have a screen to share,
Okay.
you can go ahead and do that.
Can you all see that?
We can see that, Derek, but it's kind of hard for us to hear you. Maybe your volume's turned down, or
Okay, let me see. Is that any better?
it's getting a little better, but
Try to get a little closer to the microphone.
yeah, that's helping. How about members? Is that a little bit better? The closer he gets to the phone, we all right with that? Okay.
All right. Well, let me try speaking closer and a little bit louder. I'm not sure where my mic adjustment is.
I can hear you now. I can tell you're close to the screen, but it's much easier to hear you than it was when you were further back. So.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you, everybody, and happy New Year, belated New Year. Today, we have a fairly simple agenda, but a bit of material. We really just want to seek your confirmation of the direction that we're going with the core material palette. As you know, there's kind of a core materials, and then everything else sort of evolves from that. And also where we're going with the exterior spaces. Those are particularly important because the site plan process is underway. So a little bit about concept character. A lot of factors go into the materiality of the building that really begin with the personality of place, that talk about the history of the place. In your case, there's a very rich history in terms of that first thread of the railroad, the whole textile industry, and the idea that Carbo is really a tapestry that is getting layered and layered and evolving over time. And in many ways, this new building we think of the 203 as a modern day loom on which the community can start to weave its future, current, present, and future values. We also look at the civic character that's already in place and some of the buildings. And here's just one example, but we've looked at a number, obviously Carmel Mall, and the idea of this, even though it's a very horizontal building, there is this vertical expression, there's a modularity. And of course, it's very much a brick building and a brick town. Your civic buildings, your downtown is very much in the material vocabulary of brick. Historically, there's the steel, almost the carbon steel of the early train thread that came through town. The downtown is very much brick, and of course, wood is a very dominant material. So these are the core foundational materials that we see in and around Carborough that we want to pick up on and use. So a major question is, okay, if we're thinking in the brick category, what color is that brick? And as we all know, North Carolina is rich in brick, and there's many varieties and many colors, ranging from reds and various shades of reds to white to dark ebony to all shades in between. And so we worked with the town and the county group, internal group, and bedded it down to looking at what would a red brick scenario might look like, what might a very light, almost a pristine white brick, and then also a warm gray brick. And the general feeling was that the red brick felt a little bit common, pedestrian, and didn't really distinguish itself perhaps from the commercial character of surrounding buildings. The white was perhaps a bit severe and institutional, lacked the warmth. And really the general consensus came down to this warm gray, which had a lightness that we could sort of lift it off the ground, but also a warmth and a neutrality that would let the activities, the programs, the people, the artwork really be the color and the differentiated activity within the building. And so we started to look at this range or color range around the building just to see how it registered at a large scale all over the building. So here at the corner of Roberson and Greensboro, moving around, you can see it in combination here with the steel metal panels that sort of reference that other material. The southern courtyard space, you get to see the glass, this metal panel, as well as this warm brick. And you can start seeing some texture on the walls that is really a common feature within a lot of downtown buildings. There's a lot of texture, a lot of corbelling, a lot of interesting weaving together of bricks at the corners of buildings. And then further along Carr Street. On the interior side, again, going back to that personality of Carborough and the idea that this is very much appreciate the handmade, authentic materials, simple palette that is maybe a timeless palette. So looking at masonry, looking at metal, looking at wood in combination to come together. And how does that translate? These are sort of precedent, inspirational images, how that translates architecturally on the interior. So if I'll walk you through the main public spaces and how we're using materials to actually organize the spaces in a way. So here, thinking about this idea of masonry coming into the building, there's this large bar core of masonry, and using the steel inset at the elevators where we have to use a metal material. Thinking of the opposite side in wood and the warmth of wood, where the more of the reception desk and the people, and this idea of two portals that connect you into the programs on the east and the west, while also framing the north-south axis. And so going inside, this is that view. Coming in the main entry, you see the service desk on the right, as well as the entryway to the library, vertical circulation straight ahead. And around the corner to the left is the performance space. And then you can see how the elevator surround is using this darker kind of patina carbon steel. In the east-west direction, more or less where that arrow is shown, you're looking back toward the library, again, using wood to frame the performance space on the left, and more of a crisp white gypsum board ceiling and surround for the multi-purpose room on the right. Going up to the second floor, we maintain that relationship all the way through the verticality of the building. So you have the masonry on the right, the wood on the left. This is the floor with a lot of Orange County skills development classrooms and waiting areas, and then the stair to the third floor. And on the second floor, you also have access. You can see the elevator surround on the left-hand side with the masonry. And this is around that opening between the first and second floors. And then on the third floor, again, wood on the left, masonry on the right. So you begin to see that skylight section coming down. And here is the portal that connects you to access to the roof terrace. So that's a quick walk through the interior spaces and palette of materials. Now, the exterior is being developed maybe a little bit ahead of other parts in order that we can keep up with the site plan submittal review and approval process. So major exterior spaces include the entry plaza to the north, the courtyard space to the south, and the exterior roof terrace that extends on the north side on the third floor level. So if we zoom into those, and I would add right here that if you can see my cursor, this is the high point of the site over here, and everything, including water and Awassa water, is draining down to this southwest corner. And so this planting bed here, as well as these planters along Roberson, are actually stormwater devices. So they are actually capturing and detaining stormwater as it comes in. And in fact, a lot of the building, the roof is going into those areas as well. So we're treating that on site in these two locations. So these become not just landscape, but very important stormwater components. So zooming into that north, we have this is a curbless street, going back to that, the wall in Asheville, that really begins to sew together the vehicular portion and the pedestrian. And these planters have a little bit of depth in order to contain varying amounts of water, but also bridging across and a short curb just to prevent anybody from, going into them. And then there's a series of built-in benches along this edge here that are designed to be very porous to the street so you can move easily in and out, but there's definitely the feel that you are on the, let's say, the secure, the safe, the pedestrian side of that, if you will. And a couple models of what monolithic benches might be like, and these bridges that cross the stormwater devices are seen here. And this is a view of what that plaza might look like from the aerial. You can actually see the roof terrace on the upper right corner, and one bridge cutting across here. There are into the concrete, we've inset some wood seats just to illustrate that sense of sitting and comfort, but also to take the chill away on days like today. And here's a view down at ground level looking back towards the entry of that front plaza. Street trees, we're looking on this side in Greensboro at pin oaks, and then within the planters, a combination of juncus and wildflowers, so things that do very well in varying damp and dry conditions. When we go to the south courtyard, here's an aerial view with we have smaller columnar maples along this street here, and then some type of, to be determined, but more of a specimen flowering tree that would sort of punctuate the center of that courtyard, with some similar seating around the perimeter. And as you'll see, we're looking at perimeter seating out of a combination of precast and wood, but also more playful, I call them pebble seats, but they have more of a sculptural quality. So even when not being used, they kind of add some type of visual interest as you look into the space from inside the building. So here's a peek at that courtyard from an elevated perspective. And you can see the down from the street level looking in, perhaps a flowering tree that would differentiate itself from the others. We have some green wall growth designed over here, probably in the Virginia creeper plant type. And then a little closer in look, we've populated it fairly well, but we imagine this to be a fairly intimate and quiet courtyard. And then lastly, up on the roof terrace, third floor, picking up those pebble seats, again, as kind of sculptural objects set on these beds of crushed slate. And the reason we do that is because we're within the overhang of the building at that point, and green roofs are not going to really do well under the shaded overhang. So we sort of transition from that to the plant growth out further. And you can see the roofscape can be a rich medley or combination of different types of sedums and succulents. We're looking at a lightweight cable rail system up to secure that area up on the roof area, and then some simple furnishings that could be placed out there for use and easily movable. So here's a quick view from above of that space, and then another down at the eye level here. I think that's really the content. I ran through it pretty fast, so love to pick up your questions, but just a quick look at next steps is we're obviously here today, January 12th. We're anticipating the next time we'll probably come to you all is on the 26th with final design development update of the final materials. So it won't just be wood, but it'll actually be a wood sample and a brick sample. And somehow we'll figure our way around this virtual setting where we could perhaps leave samples at town hall and you all could take a look at those ahead of that meeting. But also to talk about some of the building systems that are decisions that are being made as it relates to their performance, their life cycle performance, and those types of things.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Derek. And before I see what comments or questions council members have, Kathy, I noted on our agenda that this is technically, it says it's on, at least on the agenda, it says it's technically a public hearing. Is that just because anytime we talk about one of our public buildings, we open up the opportunity for members of the public to comment if they'd like, or was that on there by accident?
I believe so, but I'll defer to David or Trish on that.
I don't know that it matters. I'm not sure if there's anyone in the audience or not, but I just wanted to know whether I needed to open a public.
I think it is because it's one of our buildings when we adopted that policy. I see Trish nodding her head, but.
Is that right, Trish? Okay, so I'll go ahead and just open up the public hearing. So,
yeah, until we reach the next step, I think after that, we probably wouldn't call them public hearings, but after the meeting at the end of February.
Okay, great. So I've opened up a public hearing. All right, now let's hear comments and concerns, questions from the board. Let's go, or the council. Let's go first with Jackie.
I was just curious because it was called a public hearing. And usually when there's a public hearing, we have input from advisory boards. And I know we have an appearance commission. So, and you know, if this was truly a public hearing and had gone before the advisory boards, the appearance commission would have had an opportunity to weigh in, and I would have been really interested in their remarks. At what point does the appearance commission get to see this, or any of our other commissions? Nice cat, Lydia.
I'm jumping in.
So sweet. So is there, you know, do the advisory boards get to weigh in on this, particularly the appearance commission? It's part of their charge.
Trish, the timeline, can you tell us that?
I mean, that's really up to you because this project does not require a permit that goes to a public hearing. We have not in these presentations to you, we have not scheduled it going to the advisory boards before it comes to you. So we need your guidance on how you would like us to handle that.
I would personally appreciate, before it goes to the next step, the appearance commission at least getting a chance to like look at it and weigh in. And I would imagine that the downtown groups would also like to have a chance to weigh in. I'd hate for us to get to the final stage and have our advisory boards and our citizens saying, whoa, what's this? I think we're setting ourselves up if we don't get citizen and advisory board input before we go much further, particularly since this was called a public hearing.
And I know, I think Derek talked about sometime in the next couple of weeks that a sample of the brick and or stone or whatever, somehow we get a chance to see it. So is that possible sometime in the next month, Trish, to get have our advisory boards kind of get a review at this, the appearance of this, just for our consideration, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could bring the appearance presentation if you wanted to all of the advisory boards or to the appearance commission. And I mean, we can look at the list and see how, you know, and how, I mean, I'd be happy to propose that to David, maybe in an email, just to facilitate the conversation, and then he could share it with you. And if we have a thumbs up, you know, we could do that. Yes, we have time to do that.
I think it's really important.
I think, yeah, you know, whereas we're not talking necessarily about every point along the way, but this kind of major decision about the look of the building, I think it would be helpful for us maybe to get also just a take on our from our advisory board members. That's I'm not against that. Other comments from other council members? Let's see, Damon, and then Randy.
I don't really have comments other than to thank Derek for the update, and I appreciate seeing the way that this has evolved every time you come back to talk with us, and it's just can't wait for a groundbreaking. So thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Damon. I agree. Randy?
Happy New Year, Derek.
Thank you.
And thank you for the update. I'm really delighted you went with the gray. I like the way you described its warmth and yet the light. It also has, using that color brick, makes it feel open. There was a good feel of openness that the dark brick had a feeling of being closed in and cavernous. So I appreciate that you recognize that, because the 203 will be sitting in a great space for sunlight. So I really think that the that color is great. I think balancing the wood with the more the other materials, I think, is a very interesting counterpuntal feel that brings in the more traditional with something that is a more modern feeling. I really like the way the exterior spaces are being visioned. The kind of foliage that you're looking to put in feels right. I like the fact that Roberson is curbless. That's a really good feeling also. So I'm really glad you walked us through this. It is evolving in a way that is even more exciting than I thought it would be. It doesn't have the look or feel of a municipal building. I think that that's the most important thing that I feel. So it feels like it's going to be easily embraced by the public. So I thank you for all those sensitive awarenesses that are coming through in the materials. So I appreciate it. I look forward to February 26th.
Great, thank you, Randy. Any other, let's see, Susan?
Yeah, good evening, Derek.
Hi.
Thank you for your presentation. Yeah, I agree with so much of what Randy said here. I wanted to throw in just a couple of questions. It was a little hard for me to tell from the pictures in terms of how much of the interior will be walls that will be painted. But it did look like there will be some painting, and from what I saw in the pictures, it tended to be white. And is that what you're thinking in terms of the color for the paint inside?
You know, that's a little bit to be determined. So once we've got what we call the core palette figured out, we are looking at, of course, white there are many shades of white, first of all, but they're fairly neutral. They're bright. They reflect the light. They make space generally feel more spacious. So it would be a reasonable starting point, and then to think about accents. So within spaces like the performance space or the multi-purpose room, where we also need to look at acoustically absorptive materials, those then start to become wall accents and things like that. There's also a fair bit of glass on the interior to make it as visually contiguous as possible. I can't say definitively, but I'm sure there will be plenty of white walls and non-white walls.
Yeah, I was just curious where you're going with that. It's just really gorgeous. My other question is on the exterior, where it just seems like you've done a wonderful job of opening up the exterior and encouraging it to be, really comfortable places for people to sit and have a sandwich, talk, look at artwork, what have you. Had any talk about including bird feeders, bird baths in that area, just to have a little bit more of a variety?
I'll be honest, no, that hasn't come up. It's an interesting idea, and can certainly think about it.
Okay.
I think especially in the, this, back here, there might be, in the quieter space that's not as heavily trafficked.
But really what I wanted to say, it's just absolutely gorgeous. And Randy nailed it. It's just, it's a gorgeous building, and it doesn't look institutional or municipal. It just looks like a very inviting place. So I appreciate all of your work on this.
Thank you. Thanks, Susan, for those comments. And Randy, I echo both of them. I think it looks awesome. Any other council members who haven't given comments want to make any? Let's see, Barbara and then Sammy.
And so mine is just a real quick thank you to Derek. I really like what I'm seeing here, so I'm just following up on what everyone else has already said. It looks amazing, and just looking forward to keeping on. Thank you.
Barbara, Sammy.
Yeah, thanks, Derek, for the update. In the agenda abstract, it said you might have some information about choices in mechanical and solar. Is that accurate? And I also just want to echo Jackie. I do think like when you mentioned the trees, for example, the Environmental Advisory Board would certainly have a say in that, and also in terms of the solar aspect. But yeah, are you all honing in on anything there?
Yeah, so solar, we've done some detailed studies of the west elevation and the south elevation from a daylighting perspective, and we have studied electrochromic glass on the west, where you get the very harsh sun angles. It comes with a first cost premium, but we've run a life cycle analysis on it, where we typically run our life cycle for 20 years, that it actually does have a positive payback over the most basic system, which is glass and roller blinds. So even though you might experience, I think it's like a $36,000 premium day one, after 20 years, you're going to realize probably $8,000 to $9,000 towards the positive side. So that would cause us to, if we can afford it day one, would be to recommend that system on the west side. And we'll be happy to share the more detailed life cycle costs with you on that and many systems. We're also on the south side. We've done a number of solar studies and looked at, without doing anything, the south exposure to glare is in excess of 50 or 60% of the year. So for office workers, particularly on the third floor, that's problematic, meaning that they would have to drop blinds, and once you drop a blind, they never get raised again. That's just human habit. So we have looked at some overhangs, and we're able, through shading in that manner, to reduce that down to about maybe 14% of the year. To get it to 100% would just be ridiculously deep eaves. So we feel like the 14% is a good spot, and then to have manual shades that users could use in those, that 15% of the year where glare is an issue for them. On the mechanical system side, we are looking at a VRF system, or we're not looking at, we have essentially designed to a VRF system. This is a very high efficiency, VRF stands for variable refrigerant flow. That's anywhere from 15 to 20% more efficient than your standard heating or chilled water system. It's a complicated life cycle analysis in terms of first cost, how you calculate that. But it does come higher for the system. But if you count the additional space you have to build for boilers and chillers for a standard system, it's dead even right from day one. And I think in 20 years, you'll see 300,000+ savings in that system. We looked at rooftop solar photovoltaics. Those are they have never really paid for themselves yet. There's always a premium. So it's an investment that you may choose to make. We're not including that in the building, but we have the infrastructure and pathways to add it to the roof. But in a 20-year span, I think it's $100,000 investment, and you'll still be a little shy of return on investment after 20 years for the photovoltaic arrays. Ironically, and I was very surprised with solar hot water that that actually does not. And the reason being is that we have such a low hot water demand in this building that the dual pipe and the dual pump system for that just doesn't. It actually costs more to run the pumps than the benefit you get from the solar heated water.
Great, thanks for that update. And in terms of cost, one of the things that we're trying to accomplish is the goal of greenhouse gas reduction. So it's good to hear that it's not exactly over 20 years canceled out, but that there is some savings and it's close to. It sounds like maybe close to
for the PVs.
For PVs, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's getting close. Yeah.
So I very much encourage you. I know that EAB would definitely be asking that you include that in there. We are currently looking at facility upgrades town-wide, existing buildings, and looking at how to define net zero and recognizing that obviously for buildings that are more than one floor located in the downtown, we can't generate all the PV or renewables. So to the deficit of renewables that we aren't accomplishing on this building, that information is something we'll want to know so we can offset it on other sites the town may own elsewhere. But to the extent possible, maximizing it both on roof space and on the parking deck. We'd be interested in hearing about how to do that too. Lastly, the mechanical system you're talking about, is that electrical or gas? Because it's another thing that, for example, we had a conversation yesterday night with the Environmental Advisory Board, and they're very much leaning towards recommending that we electrify as much as possible. And obviously with a new building, there's no better time to do it than now. So if not electrical, is that something that you could look at as an alternative for us to consider?
I'll confirm with our engineers, but my understanding is it's a heat pump type system. It's a sophisticated heat pump, so it does not use gas. Although I want to verify with them that there's not some subcomponent that utilizes gas, but I don't think it does. I think it's electric refrigerant pumps and
hopefully that would be great. That'd
yeah.
be really great. Great, thanks for that. And again, like if we could get those what you just shared with me, if we could share that with the EAB next time they meet, I think they would appreciate it a lot. That, I guess for staff, not necessarily that Derek would be there. Thanks for the presentation, Derek.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. And so I think everyone has spoken and asked their questions. Kathy, I don't think we have anyone here to speak about this matter. Is that correct?
That is correct. But we do have an additional presentation I'll let Trish talk to you about it.
Okay. All right, Trish, go ahead.
Sure, thanks so much. Yeah, Victor Stevenson is here from Barnhill. He's going to be the construction manager for the project and has a lot of experience with institutional projects, academic projects around the state. He's just going to walk through briefly for you in 5 minutes or so what we're envisioning right now about the construction management of the project, and where the beginnings of a construction management plan are going. So, Victor, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. How is my volume? I'm trying out this headset. Okay. If I get too loud, do this.
All right.
My name is Victor Stevenson. I am director of pre-construction, the planning of the project, working with the architect, working with Derek. Derek, I retired 14 months ago from the state construction office. I was assistant director under Latif. was fortunate enough to come to Barnhill. All I've ever done is public projects and CM at risk projects. Trish thought it would be a good idea to look at the site and some logistics and what we're thinking about how we would go about building your building and get your feedback on what our initial thoughts are. So let me share my screen. Let me make sure I've got the right screen. And okay, are you seeing the project site?
Not yet.
Okay.
Here it's coming now.
Do you have it now?
Yeah, we do.
All right. Here's the project site fronting on South Greensboro Street, Robertson Street, Maple to the rear, and East Carr. So out on Greensboro, we've got a major three-phase line that represents somewhat of a barrier to us getting started with construction. At some point early in the project, Duke will either move that underground or move it across the street. Along Carr Street, there's a very small power line that will either move across the street or go underground. We're really lucky. The largest three-phase power line is on the other side of Robertson Street from the site. So this pretty much lets us get started, and this will be our main entrance into the site. Coming off of Robertson and Maple, just probably coming in at one of these angles right here. That would be the major construction traffic. We're going to build the parking deck first. I'll get to that slide in a minute, but small vehicles, our superintendent, our project manager will probably come in right here during the first few months of the project. Okay. We're going to build the parking deck first for a lot of reasons. Number one, it's right at our initial access area. This particular parking deck, normally parking decks are built of precast concrete. This one is a unique size and configuration to fit the lot. We're going to precast it in place. From a logistics standpoint, that means we don't have huge beams and T's and double T's coming in on huge tractor trailers, and we don't have huge cranes. We're going to cast it in place. We will use the site for the building as the material yard to build the parking deck. During construction, we've got 3 areas identified for small cranes, concrete trucks, concrete pumper trucks to build the parking deck. Once the parking deck is complete, we will use the entire first floor of the deck for materials and laydown. The upper floors we will use for worker parking. During construction of the parking deck, this is going to be just like a project over on Austin Avenue at North Carolina Central or Kenan Drive over at UNC. You're going to have to put your people a couple of miles away, and you're going to have to bring them in on shuttle buses. But once we get this parking deck built, we've got our laydown area, and all of our employees and our subcontractors are going to be able to use the upper floors of the parking deck. Then we'll begin the public construction phase. Again, we'll use these areas right here to set the steel and go up with the public building. We are just about guaranteed to have zero impact. We don't see any impact on Greensboro Street. If there is, there'll be minimal. We know Duke may have to close a lane or two when they relocate these lines, but as far as what we're doing at Barnhill, we don't think we're going to impact Greensboro Street hardly at all. Now, I've come from managing the construction or overseeing the monitors that manage the construction for universities, community college, and state agencies like the downtown complex and DHHS. I know firsthand what it's like to get a phone call that a subcontractor was spraying fireproofing on a 6-story building, and the fireproofing drifted over to some employees' cars or the general public's cars because the wind was too high, or because the subcontractor didn't properly curtain off the area. Our goal for this is total containment of everything on the site, sediment control, stormwater control. Like I said, keeping the parking way away from downtown, and as practically as possible to build this building with minimum impact on Scarborough and venues and food and entertainment over at the Arts Center that I personally like, and a lot of the folks that are going to be working on this project like. So those are our plans. Could I entertain any questions?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Victor. That I actually, my day job, I work at North Carolina Central on Alston Avenue in Durham, so I know exactly where the construction is going on over there. But I know we have heard, we have the concern number one, we know we're taking away a parking lot, and we're working on strategies for our customers and our clients and our people who work downtown, or I'm sorry, who go downtown, where they'll park. That's one thing. But then in addition to that, we've had concerns from our businesses, around the area about how construction is going to happen, what impact it's going to have on the businesses nearby. So I imagine that's why, Trish, why you wanted us to kind of get a early glimpse here at the kind of planning for how the construction, once approved, how it would kind of phase in and take place. And I think that's really, I appreciate you showing this to us. Council members, anyone have any questions or comments for Victor and or for Trish about this? Let's see, Susan. And then Damon.
Good evening, Victor. Yes, thank you so much for your presentation. I have just one follow-up question to what Mayor LaBelle was talking about, and then what you mentioned. It sounds like very, very minimal, if any, impact on Greensboro. Is that true for all the other surrounding streets then?
Well, there will be occasions. I'm hoping my screen is still up. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. There might be some occasions where a truck will maybe need to take up part of one lane for a couple of hours. But as far as really having to shut these streets down, Robertson, Maple, and Carr, we just don't see having to do that. I don't know whether Derek planned it that way or not, but we've got these neat little places that we can put our cranes and our trucks. So, Derek, if you planned it that way, my hat's off to you.
Well, I know our small business community's been reeling from the pandemic. We'll be thrilled to hear that this impact will be so minimal in terms of their day-to-day operations. So thank you so much for your update this evening.
You're welcome. Speaking of the small business community, we would really love to find some office space to rent somewhere within reasonable walking distance. I really would prefer not to bring in a construction trailer, if at all possible. So we're looking to rent something somewhere.
Well, I know, Victor, that Mr. Manager and Trish could put you right in line with John Hartman Brown, our Economic Development Director, who is aware of all kinds of space that we probably have around there that you could consider for that.
Okay.
So, thank you.
There was one particular spot I really had my eye on, but some pretty thorough investigation has revealed that perhaps he's not a fan of the project, and I shouldn't go there.
Well, he might turn around. You never know, whoever it is. All right,
Okay.
I think Damon had some comments for you or a question.
I just wanted to follow up on Susan's comment. We know that, and I've mentioned to David before, that we know there are certainly some of the nearby businesses who will be interested in knowing more about this construction management plan. So when it gets finalized or into some kind of shape to offer that a chance for input, I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think just making sure they know, I think they'll, like Susan said, they'll be thrilled to know that the impacts on South Greensboro will be minimal, but just keeping them in the loop will be good.
Just looking at the schedule of when we might get started, I think maybe it'll be legal then for me to meet some people and shake their hands. I think it's far enough out in the future that we might have herd immunity or certainly vaccinations. It's kind of hard to do this virtually with the business owners. I really look forward to meeting them face to face.
Yeah, that's we appreciate that. I know that would go a long way toward what's going to, it'll still be a lot of change downtown for a significant period of time. All right, we have Randy, I think, next, and then Barbara.
Victor, thank you for this. It's very exciting. I really appreciate and trust, and I'm going to underline trust, that when you say with your vast experience that North Greensboro will have minimal impact, that is so. And to that, I would wonder if it's possible. Sammy had talked about this years ago, and we've just initiated a kiosk project. And I'm wondering if we could have a kiosk over near Open Eye or near the Century Center that is dedicated to show a ongoing up-to-date timeline with some diagram and images of where we are and how this is proceeding and next steps. Just as community outreach and and I don't know, maybe even a way to get some comments on a sheet, simply because this is, other than a fire station, this is really it. This is, as long as I've been in Carborough, decades, this is the greatest undertaking that we've ever had. And this is a great moment for a community to be engaged and to see the unfolding of the process. As a New York City gal, one of the things that I loved growing up in the city was when my mother would take me in my little stroller and we go and we look at the construction sites and see how things were being built and see how pipes went into the ground and how, buildings were being made. And I know that even though you're going to have fencing around and it'll be, carefully protected, I just would like to see us maximize this great experience and invite people to come and see what's being created because it's for them.
Exactly. We've done web pages. I'm thrilled at the opportunity to do a kiosk. I'm sure you remember there would be portholes. There would be portholes for adults and portholes for children to watch the project going on. I'm sure Derek and I can put our heads together and come up with something on that.
I love it, and I'll be the first one there.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Randy. And let's see, I think, Barbara, you had some comments?
I just had one comment. I appreciate the presentation and the energy that you brought to the presentation. Thank you. I just wanted to come behind Damon and Susan about our downtown business community and engaging them. And I think I heard you, Mr. Stevenson, say that once it was legal and then, COVID right. Restrictions will probably go through the end of this year and beyond. Just that's what I think, realistically. I don't know, but I mean, just the way things are just kind of panning out. But anyway, you mentioned once things were legal, you'd be happy to just kind of engage with the downtown business community. And I think even if it's virtual, when the time is appropriate, maybe to just try to get in with the Carborough Business Alliance and, lay this out. The way you laid it out to us tonight was something that I was thinking about, once it's appropriate. Right. But again, thank you. I mean, your energy is good this time of night. It's really good.
Well, thank you.
All right. So like I think we're getting near. We're winding down this item, but I see Jackie has her hand up.
Thank you. Thank you for spending time with us this evening. I appreciate the containment of the project. I think that's it takes a lot of work and a lot of planning to do that, and I appreciate it. As we move forward in the construction planning, there'll be good neighbor, as I'm sure there are with everything. So I think things like we do have an ordinance which limits hours for construction noise.
Okay.
There are people who live, right across the street.
Right across the street.
Yeah, right across the street. So we're going to want to limit noise during like following our noise ordinance. And if there's any kind of extraordinary noise that's going to happen, like from drilling or big noise times, it would probably be a good idea to let the surrounding business and residential neighbors know that that's what's to expect, and to have a number that people can call. You said you're used to being that person. So I think the hours of operation, even if it means that the project doesn't move quite as quickly as people wanted to, but kind of respecting people's off hours, I think will help garner a lot of support for the project as we move along. So thank you for your work.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks. Good points, Jackie. All right, let's go ahead. Oh, wait, Sammy, do you have something else to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question in regard to use of the parking deck for worker parking. There are a lot of spaces in there, and I presume that once the deck is built, it's pretty safe for those workers. And so my question is, will it be safe enough for the public at large to use?
That's a great question. My gut answer is, while it's under construction, there's just no way. We just can't take the risk. Not at all. I wish we could, but it's just not worth the risk.
Yeah.
Good to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Sammy, thanks for asking that. I had wondered that too, but I figured that was probably going to be the answer. So.
Yep. And even if we were inclined to do it, which we're not, our insurance company would never let us do it in the first place.
All right, there you go.
Right.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Stevenson. Thanks, Trish, for bringing him, and thank you again, Derek, too, for being here as well. And I think so. I'll go ahead and close out our public hearing. I think we're at the end of our discussion of the 203 project for this week. And I appreciate y'all being here with us. I don't think we have a resolution or anything. This is a discussion, an update, and the public hearing. So thanks, y'all. We'll go ahead and get ready to move on to our next item. I'm just going to point out to everyone in terms of agenda management. It's about 9:45ish. We've got our bike plan, and then possibly the getting on to our legislative priorities, and then we do have a very brief closed session. So let's go ahead and get on with our next agenda item, Mr. Manager.
The next item on your agenda is one that you've seen before, and it's a possible adoption of the updated bike plan. Zach.
Yes. 1 second. I'll get my screen shared. All right. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. This is the vote on the consideration for adoption of the bike plan. This was the public hearing that was held. I guess the second part was on. I'll get a slide.
Yeah.
That we presented some information to advisory boards for feedback. It says advisory boards. That's my typo. On the October 1st, and kind of taking all of those comments into the public hearing that was at the end of October and continued on to for 1st, which now we've made some changes kind of based on everything we heard between the two public hearings, between the advisory boards, between some emails that have been flying back and forth to kind of get us where we are now. I'll just kind of highlight the major changes. Number one being we've created kind of an executive summary, which is basically like a very short 4 or 5 pages that really just hits the high points related to the plan process, public outreach, those strategic priorities, and then funding and implementation. Then those revised goals, we got some feedback from council members about goals and metrics, and really changing some of the wording of those. Really, I think the big one was rewording and trying to say something about instead of saying bicycle commute share, just saying bicycle share. But it's kind of the tricky metric to get at. Commute is something that is measured by the U.S. Census, the ACS data collects that at residences. We have every 2 years, the TDM group does a survey at employers in town, so we get that on the employer side, so we can kind of get a commute mode share. But a general mode share is a little tricky, kind of as in I think it's attachment B, in some of those responses, maybe looking at some way through the Harbor our local surveying efforts to kind of try to capture that. But other than that, it's and then we also did kind of change the goals to reflect what we heard from council. Then kind of some other typos, clarifications, corrections, some of which were caught by the other emails received. And I just want to thank those folks who kind of caught those, because it's a big document and it's a lot of work, and I'll take all the help I can get. The responses to some other comments, the feedback we got from advisory boards, I think we were able to incorporate a lot of that. We had some requests for specific improvement types, and I would point out we're kind of at a planning level. So while we're thinking, we're looking at places where we want improvements, specific details really isn't, or not going to be decided on until we get more into the design level, until we start doing outreach about a specific project. We talk to residences and community members and businesses and things that are really directly impacted until we kind of figure out what the final design is going to be more closely looking like. A lot of requests for making the data from the plan available. So I think I'll be working, once we have this adopted, I'll be working with other planning staff to get this online so the GIS files can be viewable and kind of go in, see more detail. And then there were a lot of questions about this plan update process, and really our thought here is to be very intentional about this. We know there are some specific things that might be changing, whether it's community input that comes out of Carborough Connects. If there's something really important, we can look at bringing back an amendment plan. So action for tonight is really voting on this adoption of the updated plan. We'll be dissolving that steering committee that did such great work in helping guide it, and then directing staff to work with the TAB to develop local priorities. And then that local priorities, that was a similar process that was used for the last bike plan update. It said we did 10 local priorities, but I can certainly work with the TAB how far down we want to look out priorities.
All right.
If there's any other questions.
All right, thank you, Zach, and thank you so much for the detailed memo of all the final corrections you incorporated into the draft for tonight. I think we've all been kind of clear the last couple of times we've looked at this that tonight's the night for the vote on the plan. And I see a couple of hands up. I think Sammy, and then Barbara, and then Susan, and then Damon.
Zach, again, thank you for all your work, and to everyone who's been involved with this and getting it this far. Thanks for your response to my comments. In regard to your point about bicycle commute versus increasing bicycle mode share, I totally understand where you're coming from. It's the metric that the availability of the metric that is informing how you'd like to phrase it. However, I think the plan itself, the goal is to increase mode share. And I think you can operationalize it with how many people are bike commuting, but I'd rather us keep the broader scope of what that goal represents. Because, for example, our safe rides, or forget what the program is, the one for schools and maximizing the number of kids that go to school. That's something that we want to maximize too. And there may be metrics that we could find to include to inform the broader goal. So again, I very much like for us to approve this plan, but include, as other members of the public have also commented, the broader sense of what it means. understanding that you may need to operationalize it with who's bike commuting.
I'll add on to that. I think the big thing and one of the recommendations is in the plan, and what I'm hoping to do is to get some better and more regular counts. We don't, we kind of do it by project, whereas if we could do for Carborough for bike and ped counts and kind of count the whole town every 2 years or so and get a good coverage, I think that would kind of get at what you're getting at. We capture the school trip, capture all these different trip types that aren't covered in just that.
Thank you, Sammy. I think we had Barbara, then Susan, then Damon.
So I want to thank Zach for all his work on this and just all his work in general. Let him know how much he is appreciated as our transportation planner. And the steering committee, as well as all the stakeholders that were involved in this important process. I feel like other council members have questions, Lydia. Honestly, I was wanting to move the resolution attachment A, but it may be premature.
All right, let's see if anyone else has comments or questions. We got Susan and then Damon.
Yes, thank you, Lydia. I just had a few really quick comments. Zach, I forget, you had mentioned at one point, when did you first start working on this updated bike plan?
I think I started kind of late 2018. So it's been, we're coming up on 2.5 years almost.
Okay. Well, one of the things I've learned on town council is there's rarely a simple solution to public policy. And so I know this has been a tremendous amount of time. And I too just want to extend my thanks because, you have had to go through this process of really melding together a lot of different, very strongly held views among a lot of different stakeholders in the community. And you've created this vision that I think is just very sensitive to racial and social justice issues. And also it's mindful of our town's limited resources. And that's no easy task to do what you've done. And I just want to thank you for your patience and your perseverance. I want to say thank you to Council Member Foushee, who I know has served on the project steering committee, as well as the other community members and town staff. And I'm just very enthusiastically support the updated plan tonight, Zach. So thank you again.
Thanks. Thanks, Susan. Thank you for that. And then Damon. And then
I just want to share another round of appreciation for Zach and for the consultants who assisted with the plan update and for the members of the steering committee. And I like to second Barbara's motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept the plan from Barbara and a second from Damon. And then I think I had Jackie next and then Randy.
I just very quickly wanted to extend my thanks to everybody. I know this was a long and complicated process, and I really, really appreciate all the efforts at getting wide community input and listening to many voices in the community. So thank you all for that.
Thanks, Jackie. Randy.
Yeah, that was to be my comment. I wanted to just thank all of the folks on the committee who, did extensive work. And Zach, folks reported back to me what a stellar job you did herding cats. You really had a heavy lift, and you did a magnificent job. And you made folks who were on the bike plan steering committee feel that they were heard. And that's a credit to you and the rest of staff who were working with you. Something was achieved in that committee that I hope sets the guideways for how steering committees work and how folks feel about working together. So thank you for modeling the way.
All right, thank you, Randy. All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. If there's no further comment, let's go ahead and call the question, and I'm just going to shake it up here a little bit. I'll start over here on this side with All in favor, say aye. Barbara?
Aye.
Randy?
Aye.
Me? Aye.
Only you can answer that, Lydia.
Susan, it was a dramatic pause. Susan?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
Damon?
Aye.
Jackie?
Aye.
Awesome. All right, great. Thank you. Zach, we have the plan and you've got your marching orders. So
Thanks, Zach.
thank you. Thanks,
Yep,
Mel.
sounds good. Thank you all.
We appreciate it. All right. So council members, we have our closed session. I'd like to make this suggestion. Kathy, what do you think? I don't know if you've heard from folks about those league goals that you sent out today, but I know you want to get response from council members in the next day or two. Maybe you can just ask council members in terms of those goals to give you their thoughts on that, so you know how to parlay our kind of expectation, I guess, for the league.
Absolutely.
Kind of their goals. And then the council members, we can have at our next council meeting, have our discussion then of the legislative priorities, kind of looking at the list that we had tonight that Kathy had provided for us, be thinking through what we might want to add to that list. And we can have that be like our item, one of our items, early items, I guess, in the next board meeting. That makes sense, Mr. Manager?
It does. I think that's a good approach. Great approach.
All right, very good, very good. So with that in mind, with that item, then we have, we're moving on then to our closed session. So, Damon?
Move we go into closed session for a matter of attorney-client privilege.
Could I just, matters from the council, just briefly mention one thing?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to flag the reality of UNC. They postponed their reopening, but they are opening dorms, and we are peaking locally with COVID. And I just wanted to be on the record, express concern about that. They were doing a lot of new things differently, and that's great. However, the conditions in the community are only worsening, and so to whatever extent Lydia or the town manager can express that concern as you all meet with our partners, in assuring and maximizing that we don't jump the gun given these conditions on having students come back. It would be really bad if we repeated what happened last time. I just wanted to.
I agree.
Thanks.
As you said, the plan is a lot different this time. Although they're bringing back the dormitories, I know they're kind of spreading them out and everything. And we'll have to kind of watch that, monitor that. So thank you. All right, so we have a motion from Damon to go into closed session, second by Barbara. All in favor, say aye. Me, aye. Sammy?
Aye.
Damon?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Randy? Barbara?
Aye.
Jackie? Aye. All right, so we'll wait. We'll have Kathy knock off the meeting then.
All right. If you are here in attendee mode, and Rob, this is you as well.